One day he woke up, feeling the cold surround his body. When he opened his eyes, he was stunned to find himself alone on a spaceship in the middle of the vast galaxy. He started to wonder if this was all a dream, but its realism made him think otherwise. He tried to remember everything that had happened before. Like any other day, he came home from work, ate dinner, took a shower, played a few rounds of a game, and went to sleep. As he fully grasped the situation, he realized the place he was in looked exactly like the setting of the game he'd played last night, Stella Online. Stella Online is a sci-fi-style online game with a high degree of freedom, where players can become adventurers and explore the vast universe. They can also become merchants and are given a cargo ship. It's a very popular game, and finding himself in the game world made him an avid player, both excited and delighted. In the game, he was a standard mercenary who already owned his favorite ship, the ASX-08 Krisha, so being physically on that ship made him very happy. However, the cold made the experience a little less appealing. While thinking about what had happened, he noted that it wasn't strange to dream about a game he often played. That's why he thought he might be lucid dreaming. But there were no signs of him waking up, and he could feel the temperature changes in the room. This made him almost certain that what he was experiencing was probably not a dream. A sense of melancholy washed over him, and he entertained himself by fiddling with the ship's steering wheel. But before he could try controlling it with the joystick and pedals, however, it seemed his location wasn't showing up anywhere. He also realized he had no money, but thankfully there was still some food. However, one thing really caught his eye: the rare metals from the world of Sol were extremely scarce and highly valuable. It was very easy to exchange them for Enel at any station. Enel is the in-game cryptocurrency, which is much more convenient than cash, but the downside is that every transaction is recorded. For that reason, many who wanted to avoid a paper trail went crazy hunting for rare, precious metals. Suddenly, a warning siren blared throughout the ship. An image appeared. A stranger from another ship was asking the main character a few questions. This guy belonged to a group of pirates, and he intended to thoroughly inspect every nook and cranny of the main character's cargo hold. However, instead of reluctantly handing over his goods, he asked if the man wanted to buy the shipment. Of course, the pirate didn't agree to the offer and threatened to kill him if he didn't comply. When things got out of hand, the main character immediately steered the ship away as fast as he could. His ship then transformed into an armed vessel, ready for combat. The pirate started sweating nervously as he saw the main character's ship charging toward him. The ship fired continuously, blasting the pirate's vessel, causing it to eventually explode like a firework. After the intense battle, the main character couldn't deny that all the shaking and moving had made him a bit dizzy. But that didn't bother him, because he realized and had almost confirmed his theory. This probably wasn't a dream. Despite everything that had happened, he still hadn't woken up. With the certainty that this was reality, he realized he might not be in such a bad situation after all. His ship was a top-tier vessel in the world of Sol, extremely fast and agile, yet its firepower was on par with heavy cruisers. So no matter how many pirate ships attacked at once, he was confident he could fight back, because his ship was clearly on a whole other level. After the recent battle with the pirates, he started to think that if he were a mercenary in the world of Sol, he could make a living just like in a game. Checking his equipment, he saw the reward for destroying the pirates was 19,000 Enel. After reloading energy, replenishing ammunition, and performing maintenance on the ship, he still had a little left over. Next, he checked the goods recovered from the pirate ship. Once the data was processed, he found a map that helped him navigate this area, along with a lot of information about the pirates. Looking through the data, he started searching for a place to sell this information for a reward. He discovered there was a commercial station nearby, and decided to go there to trade in person. When he arrived at the place called Termain Prime, the system requested his identity because it couldn't recognize him. He thought about a name that would fit this world, feeling that the name Satu Takahiro wasn't suitable. After a few seconds, he chose the name Hero, officially becoming a new mercenary ready to face the universe. After landing at the commercial station, instead of being compensated for the rare items, Hero found himself being questioned by an official in charge of the area. The man kept asking Hero about the origin of these valuable items, as it seemed no one believed he had obtained them just from defeating pirates, especially since Hero's profile was vague and had no personal information other than his name. Before things could get any more tense, a powerful girl named Serena walked in. After seeing the strange ship in the docking bay, Serena quickly became curious about the new visitor. Upon checking Hero's information and purpose, she decided to ensure that Hero would be fairly compensated for his valuable collection of metals. Serena declared that unless there was proof the goods were stolen, Hiro would still be treated as fairly as anyone else. Even though his identity remained unclear, after all, the commercial station and Hiro could both benefit from each other. Serena also warned the station staff about soliciting bribes from newcomers, and pledged that as the daughter of Marquis Hors, she would severely punish anyone involved in such activities. Immediately, the station official complied with Serena's words and left the room. When only the two of them were left, Serena apologized to Hiro for the staff's rude behavior. She also mentioned that, looking at his empty data profile, Hiro tried to explain that he might have lost his memory while in hyperspace. However, this only made Serena more suspicious, wondering how Hiro could remember being caught in hyperspace if he truly had amnesia. Instead of questioning him further, she let it go but still had a nagging suspicion that Hiro might be a spy from another system. Hiro quickly denied this, explaining that if he were really a spy, he would have tried to act discreetly instead of willingly presenting himself to the authorities right from the start. After their brief conversation, Serena began to listen with a bit more trust. Serena left and Hiro went to collect his reward. After checking the amount, he was sure he could live for more than 40 years in this universe without having to do a thing. When comparing his current life to the real world, he realized he would have a much more peaceful life here. As the days passed, Hiro continued his research on this unfamiliar galaxy. He discovered he was in the Termain star system, which consisted of 4 planets, an asteroid belt and its main star, Termain. He also learned that this system was under the control of the powerful Graken Empire. Nearby, the Belberum Federation had been in a tense standoff with the Empire for years, so Hiro planned to fly to another star system to avoid being drawn into a potential conflict. However, since he still had plenty of time, he decided to explore the commercial district first. He was in awe as he gazed at the magnificent scenery, the kind he had only ever seen in anime and games before. While wandering around, he came across a group of suspicious-looking thugs. But when they saw Hiro's powerful weapons, they immediately fled. Before he could even begin his expedition, Hiro met an elf-like girl named Elma, who was also a mercenary. Elma invited Hiro to come with her, and his adventure continued to unfold with new surprises. While waiting for the conflict to break out, and despite being a little suspicious of Elma, Hiro still thought she could help him learn more about the daily lives of the people in the commercial district. When she learned that Hiro was an unlicensed mercenary, Elma immediately reminded him that he needed to register with a guild to avoid trouble later. She led him to her guild's office, and Hiro quickly registered his name and his ship in the system. And it was here that Hiro learned Elma was over 50 years old. Upon arriving at the office, Hiro quickly registered his name and his ship in the system. Even the guild operator was surprised to see that Hiro had absolutely no activity history whatsoever. Hiro immediately explained that he had amnesia, just like he had told Serena. After completing the registration, he needed to go through some simulation test to determine his rank. Elma watched discreetly, thinking that there was no way Hiro could achieve a higher rank than her. But after the simulation ended, both the operator and Elma were completely astonished by Hiro's results, which left them utterly surprised. When Hiro's combat rank reached gold after just a single attempt, Elma became furious and jealous, as she had struggled for 5 years just to reach the silver rank. To soothe Elma's frustration at being surpassed by a newcomer, Hiro asked her to go shopping with him. While shopping, Hiro was stunned to learn that there are no carbonated drinks in space. So he set a goal to buy a house with a garden on a planet and hopefully find his favorite kind of drink. Elma immediately shot down that dream, saying it was impossible since a plot of land on the planet cost millions of enal. However, instead of getting discouraged, Hiro saw this as motivation to try even harder. After they finished shopping on their way back to the guild, they happened to come across a group of men surrounding and intimidating a young, elf-like girl. Instinctively, Hiro was about to rush in and help the girl, but Elma immediately stopped him, saying that meddling in other people's business wasn't common in this place. However, Hiro couldn't just ignore someone who needed help. Instead of walking away, he drew his gun and fired a warning shot, threatening to shoot them somewhere vital if they didn't leave immediately. Terrified, the men ran off, leaving the elf girl safe. Elma then asked Hiro what he planned to do with the girl. But it seemed Hiro himself didn't know what the next step would be either. Both of them were at a loss for what to do, so they decided to take the elf girl to a restaurant to get her something to eat. While talking about Hiro's plans for the girl, Hiro couldn't clearly state his intentions. Elma stood up, about to leave. But Hiro cleverly appealed to her pride, getting Elma to return to the table, now determined to help the poor girl. Elma started by asking the girl's name and learned that it was Mimi. It seemed Mimi had no one to turn to, so Elma quickly suggested that she stay on Hiro's ship, since he was the one who saved her after all. However, Elma also suggested that Mimi would be in charge of all the housework on the ship, and even implied that she would be by Hiro's side to take care of him at night. Those words left Hiro stunned. Elma asked Mimi why she had ended up in Sector 3. Mimi recounted her family's tragedy. Her parents had died suddenly in a work accident while they were maintaining the colony's oxygen system. When the accident happened, they were blamed and saddled with a compensation debt larger than their inheritance. As a student, she was forced into Sector 3. Mimi couldn't possibly pay off that debt, and eventually ended up homeless. Forced into Sector 3. After hearing her story, Hiro immediately took Mimi to the Sector 3 public management office, hoping to help her reclaim her inheritance. However, when the staff member was deliberately provocative, Hiro decided to pay off the 500,000 NL debt for Mimi's parents, and decided to take her aboard his ship. Elma also bought Mimi a new outfit, and before leaving, Elma whispered something that piqued Hiro's curiosity. As night fell, Mimi cleaned herself up but remained lost in thought. It seemed Elma's words were still lingering in her mind. During dinner, Hiro noticed that Mimi seemed distracted. She reassured him that she was fine and mustered the courage to ask Hiro about his plans. After finishing dinner and bathing, Hiro said he was going to turn in early. He didn't think much of it until Mimi suddenly entered his room in a form-fitting nightgown, looking alluring with its low-cut neckline. Mimi shyly said she was ready to fulfill her duty. Hiro quickly reassured her that he wasn't expecting that. But Mimi, with her fear of being abandoned again, seemed determined to do what she believed was right. When he woke up and found Mimi beside him, Hiro felt like the whole thing was surreal. Regardless of what had happened, he realized he couldn't just think about himself anymore, especially now that he had Krisha, his status as a mercenary, and a relatively stable financial situation. Hiro felt blessed to have these precious things. Although he had spent a lot of money, having Mimi around wasn't a huge financial burden for Hiro. However, he couldn't just live day by day. He still harbored the dream of buying a house with a garden. And now, with Mimi in the picture, that goal felt even more meaningful. The two of them went to buy groceries and clothes for Mimi. Hiro also decided to take Mimi to the guild office to register her as a member of his crew. The guild operator couldn't hide his envy upon seeing that Hiro had achieved a high rank and gained a beautiful companion, all in just one night. After things settled down, Elma informed Hiro that a large-scale subjugation mission was coming up, an event where players cooperate to complete an objective. Of course, Hiro couldn't pass up the chance to join this exciting event. A few days later, 1 hour before the mission was set to begin, Hiro was preparing his ship for the event. Serena's image appeared on the screen, explaining the mission details. A pirate base had been discovered in the Gamma Sector's asteroid belt, and mercenaries were tasked with destroying it. However, the problem wasn't the pirate base itself, as they were inherently weak and not a major threat to the military. If the smaller ships escape, the military won't be able to pursue them because their own ships are too large. That's where the mercenaries come in. At this point, Hiro understood how the mission worked. First, the mercenary team would lie in wait around the location designated by the military. Then the mobile fleet will launch a frontal assault. When the pirates try to escape, the mercenaries will block their path, causing them to panic. The fleet will take that opportunity to surround and eliminate the remaining enemies. The mission would end once the fleet confirmed the target had gone silent. When Serena asked if anyone had any more questions, everyone remained silent as the explanation was crystal clear. However, Hiro, as expected, drew everyone's attention when he asked if a retreat was possible. Serena let out a small sigh and said that retreating was an option. However, if they didn't fight seriously and just ran away like cowards, that would be a huge problem. Hiro explained his reason for checking, because by the end of the mission, it wasn't just the pirates who would be surrounded, but the mercenaries as well. The mission formation they were meant to follow seemed to be pushing the mercenaries into a fight to the death. However, Serena swore on her pride as a soldier of the Star Army that she would never let something so cruel happen to her people. Hiro replied that he would trust her, but only time would tell if that was true or not. Meanwhile, Mimi was trembling with fear, a natural reaction since this was her first time participating in such a large-scale battle. Hiro suggested that if she was scared, she could stay behind on the colony, but Mimi reassured him it was just a natural reaction, and that she would be fine. Hiro was suddenly reminded of a familiar feeling from long ago, the feeling that this was all just a game. As he was lost in thought, an announcement came on, pulling him back to reality. Mimi told him that the control center had given the launch order. Although he still had a vague feeling in his heart, Hiro decided to enjoy this event to the fullest. With that, the Krisha began its launch. As they got underway, Mimi carefully checked the coordinates of the military and the other mercenaries. For her, this was the first time experiencing this kind of work, so she couldn't help but be nervous. However, when she looked at the surrounding view, Mimi's gloomy mood immediately brightened when she saw the huge number of spaceships lined up. Since this was a joint mission involving many different mercenaries, it was no surprise that she could see ships of various colors from every direction. However, one ship in particular really caught Mimi's eye. The ship looked sleek and stylish, perfect for a charming person like Mimi. She was surprised to see such a pristine white ship. Hiro explained that it was the SSC-16 Galactic Swan, but in his opinion, the ship was just a giant pass of junk. He added that while it was designed for high-speed combat and was even faster than the Krisha, its maneuverability was so terrible it was almost impossible to handle properly. On top of that, its maintenance and repair costs were ridiculously expensive. There were just too many things wrong with that ship. And the biggest problem was its tendency to go out of control. Hiro thought that only a weirdo would pilot a ship like that. And it turned out to be Elma. This made Hiro chuckle to himself. Mimi was a little worried about Elma's safety, but Hiro reassured her that a self-proclaimed veteran like Elma would be fine. This helped calm Mimi down, and she trusted that Elma could handle herself. When they finally reached the space pirates' hideout, Hiro realized that the military had likely positioned him in an enemy-filled area on purpose. Now, as the time to begin the mission arrived, Hiro took a deep breath to steady his mind as the military launched the attack. Projectiles from the fleet's warships rained down on the pirates' base, nearly destroying the entire thing in a single volley. Hiro was amazed by this display of power, while Mimi stood frozen like a statue, unsure of what would happen next. Suddenly, a beep echoed through the ship, and at the same time, Mimi announced that they had received a new transmission. The report stated that numerous small and medium-sized pirate ships were fleeing, and because of that, they had decided to break radio silence. The battle had officially begun. The two of them braced for impact from the space pirate ships. Hiro tried to chase after the fleeing ships, but the pirates were prepared, sending 2 large ships and 2 small ones to intercept the Krisha. Hiro was stunned by their boldness, daring to face his powerful warship head-on. With just a lift of his hand, the 2 large ships exploded instantly, causing the remaining 2 small ships to immediately flee. However, Hiro wasn't about to let anyone escape. And with its full power, he had the Krisha destroy the rest of them in a single blow. Even so, the battle wasn't over yet. As the enemy signals began to fade, Hiro was starting to feel a bit bored. Most of the enemies were busy fighting the other mercenaries. Instead of just waiting around, when Mimi received a report that the enemy was engaging with allied ships, Hiro immediately piloted the Krisha to provide support. As they approached the combat zone, they were suddenly attacked by a volley of massive guided missiles. Fortunately, with help from the other mercenaries, they managed to escape the dangerous situation. After the ship split up and departed, one ship returned to base to resupply. Hiro asked Mimi for a status update, and she reported that the Allied forces had the upper hand. But near the military sector, a fierce battle was still raging between 3 medium-sized ships. Hearing this, Hiro grew excited and decided to head to that area. He put Mimi in charge of the radar and communications system so he could focus on piloting. As they got closer, they discovered the enemy ships were actually retrofitted civilian transports, but they were equipped with lasers and turrets for close-quarters combat, making them far from easy opponents. Instead of attacking head-on, Hiro instructed Mimi to minimize their heat signature and hide among the ship debris, then approach from the enemy's blind spot. Mimi worried that the enemy might detect this change, but Hiro explained that on a battlefield cluttered with so much debris, radar is often ineffective, and the enemy would be using thermal sensors to track them instead. This technique was called thermal stealth, a useful trick Hiro was lucky to remember from the original game. At this point, Mimi followed Hiro's every command. Meanwhile, the other mercenaries were starting to run low on fuel and ammo, but instead of retreating, they kept fighting. Because the enemy's medium-sized ships were scattered everywhere, their movements were severely restricted. Just then, a strange ship appeared out of nowhere. The mercenaries began to wonder where it came from. Hiro introduced himself and announced that they were here to help. With Hiro's arrival, the enemy team lost their advantage and began to flee. After the intense battle, the mercenaries thanked Hiro and were especially impressed with his ship, but it seemed Mimi was more popular with them than Hiro. As they prepared to move to their next destination, a sudden warning blared through the communicator. Just as Hiro had predicted, Elma had finally lost control of her ship, the Galactic Swan. Mimi was worried for Elma, But Hiro nonchalantly said that once a ship goes berserk, there's no way to stop it, as no other ship is fast enough to catch up. Elma screamed over the communicator that she was about to explode. Hearing that, despite his earlier indifference, Hiro showed a flicker of concern. And sure enough, the ship really did explode, but the cockpit was so sturdy that Elma survived the blast. On the command ship, Serena heard the massive explosion and wondered about its source. Then realized it was one of the Allied ships. She began to worry if Elma's situation would affect the mission, but it seemed the incident didn't have much of an impact. Elsewhere, a fleet operator reported to Serena that the system had detected an unusual power signature from Hiro's ship. Despite being only a bronze rank mercenary, Hiro's scores were already at a platinum rank level. So much so that the operator thought there might be some kind of error. In Serena's mind, she had found Hiro noteworthy from their very first meeting. Hiro didn't seem like a veteran or mercenary, but more like a civilian. As this suspicion grew into a certainty, she ordered the collection of all available system data on Hiro, and her interest in him deepened. Meanwhile, on Hiro's ship, the system received a message from the military stating the mission would end after their successful confirmation. Hearing this, Hiro knew his fun was about to be over. While the main reward came from the mission's bounty, the heaps of cargo and salvage left behind by the space pirates were also a significant source of income. Immediately, Hiro quickly began collecting everything around him. Among the goods he found was a rare and dangerous item called a singing crystal. Despite knowing the risks, Hiro decided to collect it anyway, making sure no one else spotted it. This crystal was a special item in the game that, when broken, would summon a large number of living crystal monsters. It was an item used to trigger mob clearing events. And depending on how it was used, it could be helpful in the future. After gathering everything, Mimi asked Hiro about his life goal. Hiro replied that he wanted to have his own house and a garden on a planet. Hearing this, Mimi looked incredibly excited, as if energized by Hiro's ambition. Hiro asked Mimi about her dream. He asked her what she liked to do. Though she was a bit embarrassed, her rumbling stomach gave her way, and she said she wanted to try every delicacy across the universe. A true culinary journey with Hiro. After the stressful mission, upon returning to the colony, Hiro helped Mimi take a step toward her goal by taking her shopping for kitchen supplies. Model. Thanks to the salesperson's skill, they didn't just buy a few items, but ended up completely refitting the ship's galley. This wasn't too expensive for Hiro, thanks to the money he'd earned from his mission. When they returned to the guild office to collect their reward, the guild staffer looked at Hiro with envy, even though he hadn't done anything. Eventually, another staff member, a woman, came over to help Hiro and Mimi. She chatted with them warmly, remarking that Hiro must be very busy. Hiro replied that it wasn't too much work. The staffer suggested that with his power, Hiro could earn a lot more money in more dangerous star systems, or by commanding his own fleet. However, Hiro had no intention of doing so. The clerk grew curious about Hiro and Mimi's relationship, and was taken aback when Mimi called Hiro her master. Seeing the shocked look on her face, Hiro tried to explain, but it didn't make her any less surprised. She thought that kind of thing only happened in novels. Joking that if Hiro ever needed it, she would be willing to join his crew too, but Mimi quickly cut her off. The clerk then told them about Elma and what happened after her ship was destroyed. Although Elma wasn't seriously injured, her bank account was bleeding badly from the compensation bill sent by the military. Even though the damage was minor because it was a military warship, the costs were anything but cheap. Now, Elma was struggling to earn enough money to pay off that debt. Hiro knew that no one would lend money to a mercenary whose means of making a living had been destroyed. Mimi was worried for Elma, but there was nothing more she could do. If she didn't come up with the money, Elma would be sent to a prison station. When they got back to the ship, Hiro enjoyed a meal from their newly purchased 3D food printer, but Mimi had no appetite, worried that Elma might be going hungry. Seeing Mimi looking so sad, Hiro invited her to go for a walk. While they were out, Mimi spotted Elma sitting dejectedly in a filthy alleyway, overwhelmed by her mounting debt and the threat of being sent to prison. What worried her most was that the prison station was full of the very pirates that mercenaries like her had helped capture. Elma knew that, with a debt of 3 million, there was no way she could pay it off in just a few short hours. Just as tears began to well up in her eyes, Mimi ran over to comfort her. Even though Elma had treated him so poorly, Hiro used all the money he had earned to pay off her debt. Elma was stunned and grateful, realizing that even after she'd been so cold to him, he had still saved her from her misery. But of course, Hiro's help didn't come for free. He offered Elma a spot on his crew. Hiro couldn't think of anyone more suited for the job than Elma. Besides, the job came with a salary and a place to live. So, despite feeling a bit awkward, Elma accepted Hiro's offer. Meanwhile, Serena received a report that Elma had paid off her 3 million NL debt in just a few days. Serena knew the higher-ups enforced a strict policy on mercenaries' earnings, but she was still astonished that Elma had access to that kind of money. Serena even considered leaving the military to become a mercenary if it paid that well. When Elma boarded Hiro's ship, she was completely surprised by its luxury. She never imagined a mercenary ship could be so lavish. Hiro explained that they were looking to buy an automated cooking machine and that this was all just a coincidence. Before Elma could say another word, Hiro quickly cut her off and told her she should go take a shower. This made Elma blush, imagining other reasons Hiro might have. He added that she'd been through a lot this past week, so a shower would help relieve her fatigue and wash off a week's worth of grime. Mimi showed her how to use the bathroom. Meanwhile, Hiro was thinking about how to make more money, since his wallet was feeling a bit chilly. He decided to become a bounty hunter and go after small pirate groups, since security in the star system wasn't exactly tight, and these pirate bands were becoming more and more active. At this rate, Hiro believed it was only a matter of time before he could save up 1 million NL. As he was lost in thought, he was surprised when Elma entered the room in her most seductive nightgown. It seemed that from the beginning, Elma had assumed Hiro had other intentions when he invited her to join the crew. After everything happened, Elma realized that Hiro hadn't actually intended to use her that way. Even so, she couldn't deny that she had also enjoyed the experience with Hiro. Meanwhile, it seemed Mimi was worried that with Elma's presence, Hiro would no longer pay any attention to her. To ease Mimi's worries, Hiro quickly tended to her needs. Hearing the suggestive sounds, Elma began to wonder just what she had gotten herself into. Ever since the last major campaign, the number of space pirates had decreased dramatically, but relations between the Empire and the Federation had grown more tense. Although Hiro had no intention of joining the upcoming major battle, he decided to stay in the star system for a while to make more money. Meanwhile, Elma was enjoying a drink, beaming, thrilled that they'd earned so much money that day, even more than Hiro had. As it turned out, Hiro had already reached his target amount. In just a short time, their plan had gone better than expected. With the Empire loosening its security, pirates targeting mining ships in the asteroid belt were popping up everywhere. Hiro hid himself among the pirates and hunted them down one by one. Even the tougher ones were nothing more than parasites against the power of the Krishna. As a result, Hiro hit his target of 2 million NL in just 1 week. With this large sum of money, Elma suggested that Hiro take them shopping the next day. Mimi, however, didn't think it was necessary, feeling that as a newcomer she didn't deserve a reward. But Elma wouldn't have any of it, saying that since Mimi had been taking care of Hiro this whole time, she absolutely deserved it. Hiro told them that if they felt forced to stay, they were free to leave. Immediately, both of them shot that down, saying that neither of them wanted to leave him. The warm feeling of knowing that there were people who wanted to be by his side made Hiro's eyes well up with emotion. She then thought of a way to make Hiro happy and decided to use her own body. The next day, at the commercial district of the 3rd sector, the two girls shopped to their heart's content. Hiro found a can of Coke at a convenience store, which made him ecstatic. However, after taking a sip, he realized its taste was nothing like the Coke he knew. Back in the real world, even so, Hiro, a Coke addict, decided to buy all the Coke in the convenience store. As they were preparing for their next mission, and to hunt pirates once again, they stumbled upon some Blueburn warships disguised as civilian mining vessels. Things got worse when those warships spotted them. To avoid being crushed by a large squadron, Elma quickly followed Hiro's orders. While Mimi was still confused about what was going to happen next, Hiro entered the coordinates to ensure all witnesses were eliminated, and that whatever the enemy was secretly up to would never see the light of day. Before the enemy could strike first, Hiro decided to make his move and seize the advantage. As he charged toward the enemy ship, it seemed their own ship didn't get a single scratch, just as Hiro had anticipated. After a moment, Elma reported that it looked like they hit the enemy's shield battery. Seeing that the enemy ship was slowing down and trying to escape, Hiro wasn't about to let that happen. He charged in and delivered the final blow, causing the enemy ship to explode. Right after destroying them, Hiro checked the ship's black box and data storage to make sure everything was okay. Elma asked if the data was really that important, and Hiro replied that if they sold it to the military, it could be worth millions. He assured her he would handle the sale since he already had a contract with the relevant office, and promised to keep the group out of trouble. It would be like they were just selling some items. However, reality didn't go as expected. After selling the information, they were unintentionally dragged into the battle between the Federation and the Empire, the very thing they were trying to avoid. This left Hiro feeling dejected and unmotivated, especially since it involved the Empire. Even though it was a mercenary's job, Hiro didn't want to get involved and didn't negotiate any further. While at the office, Hiro's presence with two cute girls by his side drew the attention of everyone around them. Why Hiro was traveling with someone as experienced as Elma, who had reached silver rank, made many people wonder. Before Hiro could dwell on any negative thoughts, a soldier captured everyone's attention as Serena entered. Serena thanked everyone for waiting and began the briefing on the battle to defend the 9-star system. Based on the information Hiro had sold them, the Federation forces were estimated to be stronger than the Empire's. The Federation possessed 8 large battleships, 24 heavy cruisers, 32 light cruisers, 64 destroyers, and 128 corvettes, far outmatching the defense forces of the Termine system. Since reinforcements would only arrive the day after the enemy, their mission was to hold out by any means necessary with their current forces for at least one day. According to the plan, Serena's mercenary squad would hide in the asteroid belt along the enemy fleet's expected invasion route. When the enemy arrived, they would engage in guerrilla warfare to slow their advance as much as possible. Their strongest ships would attack the destroyers, as any larger vessels had powerful shields that would be difficult for the mercenaries to handle. Serena said honestly that with this plan it was hard to say they'd have the advantage. So she asked if anyone had a plan and requested they share it immediately if they did, as it might be useful. As usual, Hiro was the only one who dared to be blunt with Serena, and his plan was truly extraordinary. Sneaking in alone, he'd be in danger. Hiro planned to destroy the enemy's flagship, and then retreat. His idea stunned everyone. Even Serena was at a loss for words, unable to tell if Hiro was actually serious or not. Hiro just smiled and said he'd try his luck. If the enemy formation fell into chaos, their attack would be delayed. If he failed, he'd be the only one to die, reducing casualties to nearly 0%. Hiro's comrades were worried, but none were afraid. It seemed he had already made up his mind. Although the plan seemed bizarre, Serena had no choice but to accept it with some reservation. Hiro prepared for the most dangerous and intense mission of his life. Serena told him to come back safely because the Empire would handsomely reward his sacrifice. However, Elma did not agree. She was seething with frustration. Hiro tried to calm her down, but Elma couldn't accept him throwing himself into such a risky mission. Knowing that a ship like theirs charging into the middle of an enemy formation was insane, Hiro explained that he wouldn't have made this proposal without careful consideration. He walked over to the trophy display case, insisting that he had a plan, which involved the lethal singing crystal they had obtained from their last raid. Elma couldn't believe that such a dangerous weapon was still on Hiro's ship. At that moment, Hiro quickly explained that they had been very careful these past few days while keeping this crystal with them, so Elma didn't need to worry so much. The crystal they were looking at was a super-class forbidden item. If it were to break, they would be attacked by countless crystal creatures. Even so, it would be a powerful weapon for their raid. According to the plan Hiro had laid out, according to it, they would use the ultra-speed drive to ambush the enemy fleet near its predicted arrival point. When the enemy appeared, they would shut down the ultra-high-speed drive and use thermal stealth to hide among the debris, stealthily approaching the enemy flagship. Once they were close, they would use the crystals with the anti-ship reaction torpedoes. Mimi then spoke up, saying she didn't remember that being in the plan. Elma quickly explained that the weapon was extremely expensive, with each shot costing 500,000 NL. That's why it wasn't suitable for use unless it was a major battle like this one. Once the enemy flagship was taken down, their chain of command would be in chaos, and the crystal creatures would attack the enemy fleet. The plan was to use this chaos to make their escape. Elma thought Hiro's plan was insane, but not impossible for him and the ship. What made her angry was that Hiro hadn't warned them about his plan and his decision beforehand, especially when the team was already under so much pressure. Hiro ordered the crew to switch to stealth navigation and approach the enemy ships. After locating the enemy flagship, the ship they planned to attack, they fired the weaponized crystal at it and quickly retreated. Once the released crystal locked on and attacked one of the enemy ships, massive crystal shards from all over came rushing toward the center, destroying almost everything around them. Mimi and Elma urged Hiro to evacuate immediately. While there was still time, it seemed Hiro had other plans. He intended to destroy the ships one by one and collect as much of the scattered cargo as possible to sell at a high price. Elma couldn't believe Hiro, but she had no other choice. Since Hiro was the captain, he almost always got what he wanted. After an incredibly tense event, they were able to leave the area safely. Upon returning to the colony, Hiro was overjoyed that he had finally collected a significant amount of cargo, which would be a great addition to his savings. He excitedly asked Elma for the total amount they had earned that day. Elma was stunned as she calculated the reward for the 3 battleships and 4 heavy cruisers they had destroyed. In total, they earned about 10.95 million NL. However, after deducting fuel and ammunition costs, Hiro would have a total of 11.13 million NL in his savings fund. But apparently, that still wasn't enough for Hiro, as he was planning to buy a private house with a garden on a safe planet. Elma then suggested that if Hiro wanted to earn that much money, then perhaps they should join the Graken government forces. With Hiro's skills, he would earn money much faster. Once he became a nightmare, however, Hiro decided to refuse, no matter what Serena did. He didn't want to join her group, fearing that she might abandon him when trouble arose. Instead of giving up, Serena became even more aggressive in her attempts to persuade Hiro to join her team. She didn't like letting her prey escape and was willing to do whatever it took to keep him. However, Mimi and Elma also became more cautious, protecting Hiro to avoid any unnecessary conflict. In the end, Hiro agreed with Serena and accepted her offer. Hiro's whole crew returned to the Serena system, a high-tech system with medical stations in its biologically focused colonies, and it was also famous for its synthetic meat and genetically modified crops, which thrilled the 2 girls. Meanwhile, Serena was talking to one of her uncles. Her uncle wanted her to form an independent unit, one that could move freely and hunt space pirates. This made Serena happy, as it confirmed her status as one of the leaders. That was why she was going to make sure Hiro would not escape. The 3 of them had finally arrived at the Serena system, a very prosperous planetary system with 2 habitable planets, 3 research colonies, and 1 trade colony. This was because they had a wealth of natural resources. Within the state-of-the-art facilities, numerous merchant ships were constantly coming and going. If there were a lot of merchant ships, Hiro theorized, then there would likely be a lot of pirates too. This was also the reason they had to take on this kind of work. But before any raids, they first had to find a place to stay. In the end, they all decided to head to the trade colony, figuring they'd be able to enjoy more recreational activities there compared to a research facility. On the way to the colony, Hiro's group came across a distress signal that Mimi detected. It seems a civilian ship is being chased by pirates. And immediately, a battle broke out, but the enemy quickly fled, activating their FTL drives. The civilian ship they rescued sent their thanks, and since their underbelly had been hit by the pirates, the captain asked Hiro and his team to protect them until the military arrived. Hiro immediately stated that his services weren't free, and that they would need to be properly compensated. And a deal was quickly struck. When they finally reached the colony, the team was astonished to see its scale was even larger than the Termaine Prime colony. Before landing, they laid out their plan for the day. First, sell the loot from the pirates, then contact Inagawa Technologies to collect the bounty. Mimi insisted on selling the items herself, and the group agreed, letting her take charge this time. After that, they headed to the military station to collect their reward. It seemed the colony was in a perpetual state of night, with a brilliant illumination system. When they arrived at the station, they were surprised to learn they'd be paid 15,000 for the 2 pirate ships, but the officer insisted that Hiro's team deserved it. On the way back, Ito began to wonder if this colony was stashing weapons somewhere safe. However, since there were no answers or theories for those questions, Hiro decided to focus on finding food after a long, tiring day. When they finally returned to the ship, Mimi suggested Hiro go to the medical center for a checkup, because according to the reviews she'd looked up, the situation didn't look good at all. Hiro thought it was a good idea, especially since they were in an area with all the necessary equipment. Mimi was worried about Hiro, especially because of his amnesia, and it would be awful if his condition worsened. However, Hiro had been hiding the truth from them all along. Elma seemed to realize that when she said she believed Hiro was faking his amnesia. Hiro was momentarily stunned but quickly denied it, insisting he wasn't lying. Still, Elma wasn't fully convinced and said it wouldn't hurt for him to share his secret. At first, Hiro was hesitant, but in the end, he decided to tell her the whole story, no matter how wild it might sound. He started from the very beginning. Even so, after hearing everything, Elma still couldn't believe that such things could happen. Elma thought about how Hiro was unfamiliar with the values of this world, and how he didn't have any records, as if he had appeared out of thin air. Elma slowly started to believe Hiro when she realized that the parts on his ship were compatible with this world's technology, and that he had managed so well in the mercenary world thanks to his vast knowledge. However, Elma's doubts returned when Hiro revealed that he wasn't a mercenary in real life, but just an office worker. What shocked Elma the most was when Hiro said he had been pulled into a game, the very one they were living in. Although the information Hiro provided only confused her more, Elma still felt that Hiro's words were starting to make a strange kind of sense. Before jumping to conclusions, Hiro also considered that maybe he had lived in this place for a long time, and had perhaps lost his memory and identity in the process. Even so, instead of overthinking it, Hiro decided to take the girls shopping. He was surprised to see so many different species living in the colony. As they walked down the street, they happened to pass a clothing store, which caught Mimi's eye. Hiro took her inside to get some new clothes, and after she tried on dress after dress, 1, then 2, then 3, and more, Hiro ended up buying them all because he loved what he saw. After they finished shopping, they went to the mercenary guild in the Elan colony to register. After finishing the paperwork, they decided to get something to eat as Hiro was starting to feel hungry. However, while they were still at the office about to check their account, the officer informed them that they had received a message from Isekai'd Technology about the reward. The proposed price was 500,000 NL. Hearing this, Mimi had an idea. Since they wanted to get a health checkup, why not go to Isekai'd's hospital? Mimi immediately asked the female officer if she could get a referral for Hiro for a general checkup. And soon enough, they found themselves at a large hospital. While still outside, they came across a food truck. But Hiro and Mimi weren't very impressed with the taste, because even though it said farm fresh, the food felt like it was made from pre-packaged food containers. Upon entering the medical facility, a Pac-Man-like robot greeted them, introducing itself as a guide unit that would show Elma and the others around the facility. They followed the cute little robot until they reached the doctor's office. The doctor then introduced herself, saying her name was Shoko, the doctor assigned to them for the day. After the brief introduction, they quickly began the medical checkup. Dr. Shoko asked for his medical history, and Hiro revealed that his memories of his past life were becoming increasingly vague. Dr. Shoko quickly remarked that it seemed like he'd been thrown into this world unexpectedly. With that in mind, she decided to run a wide range of tests to ensure any abnormalities in Hiro's body were thoroughly analyzed. They started with a full body scan in a medical pod. Hiro was quite amazed by the scale of the facility, prompting Dr. Shoko to happily boast that they had top-of-the-line equipment. Hearing this, Hiro thought she should probably be a researcher, but Dr. Shoko, who turned out to be one of the passengers from the ship Hiro's team had rescued, insisted that she was both an excellent doctor and a researcher. After running the necessary tests, Dr. Shoko discovered that, aside from Hiro lacking the multilingual translator implant that most people had, he also possessed a unique human genome. Because of this rare discovery, she asked if he would be willing to sell some of his genes for 3 million NL. Hiro immediately agreed, unaware that he would have to provide a blood sample and a semen sample. Dr. Shoko even deliberately teased Hiro, saying he could look forward to the harvesting process. Naturally, Hiro blushed at the comment. Hiro even asked what kind of service Dr. Shoko provided, implying he was looking forward to it too. As Dr. Shoko leaned in towards him, Hiro started stammering uncontrollably. She put on a glove and began the procedure, and Hiro let out a scream, but no one knew if it was from pain or some other sensation. When Mimi and Elma entered the room, they were surprised to see Hiro having trouble even standing up. Dr. Shoko reassured them that Hiro was fine and there was nothing to worry about. In reality, Hiro had just received a series of vaccinations, so nothing special had happened. What an anticlimax. On the other hand, Dr. Shoko was very curious about Hiro's past, but it seemed Hiro wasn't comfortable discussing such a sensitive topic. Nevertheless, Dr. Shoko frankly stated that there was a lot more she wanted to research. Hiro quickly brushed it off, telling her to focus on analyzing the genetic data first. Elma asked if Hiro's examination was finished, and indeed it was. Mimi suggested that while they waited for the results, they should get something to eat before leaving. Dr. Shoko reminded them that they should rest for at least 3 days to recover. After the injections, Dr. Shoko called Mimi and Elma aside and told them something in secret. Mimi enthusiastically accepted this advice, while Elma looked unhappy. Now that the health checkup was officially complete, the details would be sent to their ship. However, what stuck with them the most was the total cost of 90,000 NL. Even in a high-tech world, medical expenses were far from cheap. After a long day of checkups and walking, they returned to their ship, ready for some much-needed rest. However, just then, Elma dropped by Hiro's room. She seemed lost in thought, almost in a daze. When Hiro snapped her out of it, Elma immediately threw herself at him, about to say something. But before she could get the words out, she suddenly passed out drunk. The next morning, Hiro was confused to discover that Elma could bear a child, even though it was known that female elves couldn't have children after reaching adulthood, with a few exceptions. One of those exceptions was when an elf formed a deep emotional bond with someone. Hiro figured that Elma must be deeply in love with him. Hiro's words made Elma blush, implying that it might be true. But before they could delve deeper into the topic, they decided to tour one of the most famous spots in the system. Hiro thought it would be a great opportunity to learn more about this world. While both Hiro and Mimi were excited about the tour, Elma seemed anxious as they prepared to enter Sierra Corp, a facility that produced lab-cultured meat. Instead of joining the other two, Elma tried to make an excuse to leave, as if she'd remembered something she had to do. However, noticing her strange behavior, Hiro stopped her, asking why the sign made her want to run off and why she called it cultured meat instead of synthetic meat. Mimi explained that there were different kinds of meat in their world, and lab-cultured meat was one of them. Still, Hiro wasn't about to let Elma leave without a reason. He pulled her inside the factory, and as they stepped inside, a system announcement welcomed them, while Hiro was impressed by how sturdy the door looked. However, that surprise quickly turned to confusion as the tour continued. Upon entering a large, empty room, the group realized the room itself was moving, carrying them deeper inside. Elma looked resigned, warning them they couldn't blame her for what they were about to witness. As the tour unfolded, Mimi and Hiro were shocked to learn that the cultured meat was made from monsters. The process even showed how the monsters were dismembered to harvest the meat. Mimi initially thought she wouldn't be able to touch meat for a while, but moments later she was already excited to continue the tour. Their next destination was Manga Corp, a vibrant hydroponics farm, where various vegetables were grown. Mimi noticed some pools of green water in the facility, and Elma explained that it was algae, the main ingredient in their ration packs. The fertilizer for this algae was recycled from waste gathered from the starships, which made Hiro reflect on how recycling, something familiar from his own world, was also applied here. The only difference was that this environment was full of alien creatures and located in outer space. After finishing their tour at Manga Corp, they visited a beverage factory named Koryu, the largest distillery in the empire. During the tour, Hiro was surprised to learn that the fruit used for alcohol production here already had alcoholic properties. This made him reflect on the advanced genetic engineering in this world. After it was over, they returned to the ship, ending a long day. The next morning, Elma got an earful from Hiro for spending 100,000 NL on drinks. Despite that, the two quickly made up and shared a laugh. Hiro decided to ban Elma from drinking for a week, which left her stunned. Leaving her stunned, Hiro warned Elma that if she tried to sneak a drink, he would give her a taste of what Dr. Shoko gave him. This terrified Elma, and she finally agreed to Hiro's demand. Afterwards, Hiro wandered around the central district to kill some time, bored of being on the ship. He didn't bring the two girls with him because Elma was still sulking about not being able to drink, while Mimi was busy with her operator lessons. Hiro didn't mind going alone, enjoying a bit of free time. He entered the commercial district, looking for a game console, and happened to pass by the alley where he had saved Mimi. There, he saw Dr. Shoko being harassed by a man. Hiro and the man got into a conflict, which ended with Hiro cutting off the man's arm. The police quickly arrived at the scene and took down what had happened. Mimi and Elma showed up too, with Elma looking disappointed that Hiro had gotten himself into trouble again. When questioned, Dr. Shoko explained that she was just on her way from the hospital to her lab to start some research, but a group of men attacked her and took her briefcase. Although they tried to take her with them, Shoko resisted and escaped. But one of them kept chasing her, and she was cornered in the alley where Hiro found her. When asked about their motive, Shoko guessed that the reason was likely the briefcase, which contained Hiro's DNA data, a top-secret and vital document. This worried Hiro, realizing that his existence had now been noticed, but he didn't seem too stressed about it. Dr. Shoko was then taken away by people from her organization to handle the incident. Back on the ship, the group had an unexpected visitor, Serena. She still hadn't given up on recruiting Hiro for her newly formed anti-pirate mercenary group. Serena claimed Hiro owed her a favor for allowing him to join the mission involving the singing crystals. She believed that if it weren't for that stroke of luck model, Hiro wouldn't be as famous as he is today. However, Hiro decided to refuse. No matter what Serena did, he didn't want to join her group, afraid that she might abandon him when trouble arose. Instead of giving up, Serena became even more aggressive in her efforts to convince Hiro to join her team. She didn't like letting her prey escape, and was willing to do whatever it took to keep him. However, Mimi and Elma also became more vigilant, protecting Hiro to avoid any unnecessary conflict. Ultimately, Hiro gave in to Serena and accepted her offer. Hiro's entire team returned to the Serena system, and as soon as they arrived, Hiro immediately took on the role of the fleet's tactical advisor. He instructed the team on the tactics they needed to execute, and how they could wipe out the pirates in a single assault. But before we get into that, let's back up a little. In reality, Hiro had no desire to join any of Serena's teams. However, Mimi and Elma had convinced him, as they didn't believe Hiro could easily have a friendly chat with a noble in a normal way. In the end, he had to listen to Serena for the sake of his comrades. In this world, nobles have the right to kill commoners without punishment if they have just cause. And that's what Mimi and Elma feared. They didn't want to risk being killed, so joining Serena's team was a way to ensure the group's safety. If Hiro continued to act rudely towards Serena, it could cause trouble for him and his teammates. So, he was forced to do something he disliked. He introduced himself to everyone, and then immediately began his lectures. Hiro shared critical information with the military about the pirates and how they operated. He also noted that the pirates might already be aware of the anti-pirate group's existence, as some members might have been spotted moving through the colony's residential areas. He showed them a map of the Termain star system, comparing the situation before and after the recent Search and Destroy campaign. Through this, the group could clearly see that the pirates' operational points had completely changed. This amount of information overwhelmed the soldiers, who realized the complexity of the enemy's strategy. However, the military really had no other choice. All encounters with the pirates and reports of their activities were taking place outside the military's surveillance zone, which clearly indicated there was an information leak. Therefore, Hiro proposed a fundamental review of the anti-pirate fleet's composition. He also advised against using large ships, as they were impractical for combat in asteroid belts and debris fields, where the pirates usually operated. Instead, the fleet should use destroyers and corvettes. However, Serena didn't fully agree with Hiro's proposal. Therefore, Hiro decided to use her noble pride to get what he wanted. He asked Serena what she was willing to do for the people of the Empire. In front of the watchful crowd, Serena immediately declared that, as a proud noble, she was prepared to do whatever it took. In just a few days, she had dispatched 32 small warships worth 5 million Enel. That same day, the first campaign began. Hiro decided to use a transport ship as a decoy, since the pirates tended to flee if they were attacked proactively. This way, Hiro could lure the pirates in and claim the 20% bounty, while the fleet also achieved its objective. Serena reminded Hiro that even after the campaign ended, he would still have to accompany them because his contract hadn't expired yet. After work, Serena invited Hiro to dinner, clearly wanting to get closer to him and keep him on the team. Hiro found it a little strange for a noble like Serena to ask him to dinner. Serena quickly explained that she just wanted to have a meal while on duty, and invited him along to discuss the upcoming training sessions. However, Serena hadn't expected Mimi and Elma to join them on this date. As the group got into Serena's limousine, Hiro silently hoped that everything would go smoothly. He even thanked Elma for coming. Since it seemed he didn't want to be alone with Serena, Elma was cheerful and excited, while Mimi seemed gloomy and annoyed. Mimi warned Hiro not to let his guard down, but Hiro reassured her that it was just business and nothing dangerous would happen. Amid the tense atmosphere, Serena finally spoke up, announcing they were going to the most famous restaurant in the area, which served organic food. At the mention of food, Mimi's mood instantly changed. When they arrived, Mimi admitted she was a little nervous, but Serena told her not to worry, assuring her they would enjoy the experience. Serena added that she'd booked a private room for them, so they didn't need to worry about etiquette. Hiro thought to himself that if he had to accompany Serena on occasions like this, at least his teammates were with him. If it had been just the two of them, who knows what might have happened. Hiro remembered Mimi's warning to always be wary of nobles like Serena. Once the group was in the room and the food was served, Serena began to eat very elegantly. However, when the wine was brought out, she immediately began to drink it quickly, and the alcohol brought her long-suppressed emotions to the surface. Serena started to lament, claiming that everyone looked down on her just because she was a woman. This outburst left Hiro, Mimi and Elma stunned. Serena even expressed her disappointment in Hiro. She blamed him for not caring about her the way he did about Mimi and Elma. Hiro just replied that she was being too overbearing. Serena expressed her jealousy, seeing how Mimi and Elma could comfortably enjoy their time with Hiro, while she, the first one to meet him, felt left out. Serena reminded him that she had helped him get out of a tight spot with the authorities, but he treated her so coldly in return. The more she talked, the more she drank, eventually getting so drunk that she collapsed. Hiro had no idea what to do next, while Elma, with an indifferent expression, suggested the group should just finish eating and leave. But Hiro couldn't just abandon Serena, knowing she was a noble. Instead of extending their time at the expensive restaurant, the group decided to take Serena back to the ship. Meanwhile, Mimi and Elma took care of Serena, who was still dead drunk. In the medbay, Hiro mulled over what Serena had said earlier, but he ultimately decided to push the thought aside, telling himself they should both just forget about everything for everyone's sake. The girls then informed Hiro that the princess was awake, and when he entered the room to ease the awkwardness, Hiro told Serena it would be best if they just forgot the whole thing. Hearing this, Serena became flustered, perhaps out of embarrassment, and quickly left the ship. The pirate sweeping operation was going smoothly, but they still needed to improve their capabilities. So Serena proposed an attack on another pirate base, and this time she even asked Hiro to join the raid as a mercenary. Hiro gladly accepted the job, for a worthy reward, of course. Elma and Mimi were also eagerly looking forward to the attack, as it would be their first real battle in a long time. The strategy this time was almost identical to the previous operation, so the team had no trouble adjusting. As a swarm of pirate ships rushed toward them, the team readied themselves for the battle and the rewards that would follow. However, once again, it seemed the enemy was concentrating their fire on Hiro's team, trying to destroy them to create an escape route. While it wasn't a bad strategy, Hiro wasn't about to let a single pirate get away. He maneuvered the Krishna with incredible skill. But even with the ship's inertial control system, the group still struggled as they were attacked from both the front and rear. However, with Hiro's masterful space piloting skills and the ship's integrated arsenal, the situation remained under control. After taking down several enemy ships, Mimi detected more enemy vessels approaching, 7 large ships and 2 medium ones. It was time to deploy the transport ships fitted with support missiles for combat. Hiro put Elma in charge of the missile controls, and she began destroying the enemy ships one by one, starting with the medium-class vessels. But just then, Mimi received new data, signaling multiple heat sources approaching from the medium-sized ships. They were heat-seeking missiles. Elma immediately gave the order to launch flares to divert them. In the middle of the intense battle, Hiro maintained a confident smile, knowing that no matter what, he would win. Under Hiro's command, the newly arrived enemy ships were taken down in just a few minutes. The nearest enemy ships were detected at the 10 o'clock position, so Hiro ordered them to keep moving forward without stopping. He was hoping to earn some more money to fill up their bank account. Meanwhile, on the fleet's command shipboat, Serena was monitoring the state of the operation and was pleased to see the battle was tipping completely in their favor. Their fleet had destroyed the enemy's largest hangar, allowing the mercenaries to pin down the enemy in one area. A loud explosion rang out as the last enemy ship blew up, and a victorious smile slowly spread across Hiro's face. Mimi announced that the area was clear. The scanners weren't detecting any pirates nearby. However, there were still some skirmishes happening far off in the combat zone, but they would be over before they could even get there. So it looked like this was the end of the battle for Hiro's team. Hiro asked about their score, and Mimi quickly reported back. After taking down a total of 33 small ships and 3 medium ones, Hiro's team realized they had earned a lot of spoils in the Termain system. Although the fleet's preemptive strike was a success and had significantly reduced the number of enemies, this was actually bad news for Hiro's team, as they couldn't expect a big reward. Instead of getting discouraged, Hiro encouraged his crew to try harder and scan the remaining enemy ship debris. Following their captain's orders, Mimi and Elma diligently searched for and collected any spoils. As a result, even though they didn't find many rare metals, they still managed to get a large quantity of expensive high-tech products. Mimi received a notification that the battle was over and they could now return. However, it seemed their base had been captured by the enemy. Hiro wasn't too worried, as he believed the pirates couldn't possibly stand against the Empire's heavy armor and weaponry. The team decided to head back and began charging the FTL drive for a quick trip home. On the way back, Elma seemed annoyed at the thought of having to look after Princess Serena again. Hiro gave a weak smile and reassured her it was only for another week. Mimi then asked him what he planned to do after the mission was complete, and Elma suggested that if they wanted to earn more money, they could head to the disputed territories. With Hiro's skills and the ship, the Krishna, he could be swimming in money. However, Hiro immediately shot down the idea. He remembered clearly that in the game, the colonies there were all under martial law and movement was restricted. All they could do was offer services and resupply their ship. Furthermore, Hiro had heard about attacks on passenger ships near a tourist planet. Hearing him mention a tourist planet, Elma suggested they could go there for a vacation and take out a few pirates while they were at it. However, in Hiro's mind, he wasn't in a hurry to achieve his goal of buying his own house, so maybe they could take a detour to relax. A moment later, Mimi announced they were approaching the colony. The Krishna was preparing to exit FTL mode and had received a docking request. However, Hiro felt something was off. It looked like some areas of the colony had lost power. And as they looked closer, Hiro noticed many ships were leaving, making the whole team even more curious about the situation. Mimi tried to contact the port authority, but couldn't get through immediately. When she finally connected, an anxious voice came through saying they were extremely busy. Hiro quickly took the comms and spoke instead. The port captain asked if Hiro's ship was equipped with proper armor and weapons for combat. Hiro, knowing his ship was fully equipped, confirmed that it was. Immediately, the captain requested assistance because the colony was under attack. Mimi and Elma immediately asked if there was a reward, but the captain explained that they couldn't issue a request through the guild yet because it was an emergency. When the captain promised to handle the reward later, Hiro agreed to defend the port to earn some extra income. He jumped into one of the combat mechs and started piloting it. Once inside, Hiro suddenly realized this was a raid event, a situation he had experienced in the game. He didn't know what the enemy looked like. A colony was under attack and needed people with weapons for hand-to-hand combat with the enemy. He couldn't remember any event like this from the game, but since he was already here, he decided to give it his all. When his robot was activated, they opened the cargo bay and prepared to earn some extra cash. As soon as they stepped off the ship, they were immediately greeted by slimy, earthworm-like creatures with sharp teeth. Hiro charged in, punching relentlessly until the monster was torn apart. Even as the monsters attacked in waves, Hiro seemed to be enjoying the thrill. As one fell, another charged forward, and Hiro fought with a smile on his face. To him, strength was power. Meanwhile, Mimi was tense and worried about Hiro's safety. Unable to take it anymore, she called out to him, and Hiro reassured her that he was fine, telling Mimi not to worry because for him, these monsters were no match for his battle armor. However, Hiro was curious to know what these creatures actually were. Elma was also disgusted, remarking that they looked exactly like the creatures from the artificial meat factory. Mimi guessed there might be a connection, but Elma said the previous managers had told them the monsters couldn't survive outside the factory. Hiro moved closer and noticed Elma might be right, as the smaller ones looked identical to the factory creatures, but the larger ones had arms and legs. The three of them wondered what this all meant. Elma then noticed that Hiro was just wrestling with the monsters instead of using his powerful weapons. Hiro explained that he just wanted to try new things when he had the chance, since he rarely got to use his power armor. After all, there were many different types of power armor he hadn't tried yet. In the game, Hiro usually used his power armor for close-quarters combat in nearby bases, because mobility was the most important factor in those situations. However, the one he had now was only slightly faster than a normal person. Even so, its strength and protective plating were the most crucial elements. Hiro's armor was a TMP-S13 Rikishi Mk3 model. Its fixed armaments included high-voltage generators in both hands, called Harite. It also had shockwave amplifiers in its legs, called Shiko, along with high-output laser cannons mounted on both shoulders, called Shikari. Its special feature was its ability to charge into an attack with a shield, a skill known as Buchikamashi. This armor was like a sumo wrestling robot. Not particularly cool-looking, but powerful, with stats that Hiro had dreamed of while playing the game. In Power Armor PvP events, everyone often used this model, turning matches into the New Year's sumo tournament. A running gag in the community. However, in Hiro's current world, this armor model proved to be extremely useful. After defeating the entire horde of slimy monsters, Mimi announced they had just received a rescue call from the Mercenary Guild. It seemed monsters were gathering at a hospital where there were still injured people inside. When Hiro asked which hospital, Mimi replied that it was Inagawa Hospital, the same place they'd had their health checkups the day before. On top of that, an Imperial Army unit would be arriving at the hospital soon. Hiro decided to head straight there, and when he arrived, he was horrified to see the monsters eating human corpses. Although the chances of survival were slim, Hiro still asked Elma if there were any survivors nearby. Mimi, who couldn't even bear to look at the screen, reported that there were no survivors on his route. Hiro proceeded into the other rooms, destroying every monster in his way. As he killed the monsters, Hiro expressed his disappointment. Without the power armor, this might have been a challenge, but with it, these monsters were nothing. The army's power armor unit could wipe them out in an instant. Still, the consolation was that he could have some fun and make some money before the army arrived. Following Mimi's directions, he turned right at the intersection and saw a whole swarm of monsters rampaging through the hospital. Hiro began to wonder why the monsters were gathered here, even joking that maybe they wanted a health checkup too. But he also questioned if this was a regular occurrence, because if it were, the artificial meat factories would have been shut down long ago. A moment later, the Inagawa Technology General Hospital's security unit arrived and asked Hiro if he was from the Mercenary Guild. Hiro confirmed, and they remarked that he was doing a good job eliminating the monsters right in front of the hospital. Meanwhile, Elma worried that the barrier between them and the outside was about to be breached because of this fight. The corrosive fluids from the monsters' bodies threatened everyone's safety, and it was clear the Empire was unprepared to deal with it. Just then, Hiro announced he would take care of the ones outside. But Mimi spotted something strange heading toward Hiro and warned him. Hiro, a bit confused, asked her what she meant. Mimi went on, saying that the thing was coming from behind the building. When Hiro turned around, he froze at the sight of a monster covered in human eyes all over its body. For the first time, Hiro looked tense as the creature lunged toward him. He immediately raised his weapon but realized the monster was faster than he had thought. Hiro began to struggle in his fight against this creature. Instead of getting stressed, Hiro brushed aside his negative thoughts and let out a laugh, remembering that modern technology is basically magic. No matter how strong the monster was, it couldn't penetrate a shield that could block space debris. Hiro delivered a powerful blow, causing the monster's head to explode. But he and his comrades were stunned to see that the creature was capable of regeneration. Hiro was now facing an incredibly tough opponent. Even so, Hiro remained calm and continued to attack relentlessly. But no matter how hard he attacked, the monster regenerated over and over. Hiro realized that his armor could only inflict physical damage, while the shield could only block attacks, not nullify its regeneration. Every time Hiro destroyed any part of the monster, it would instantly regenerate itself, even its head. If this kept up, the power armor's battery would run out before Hiro could defeat the monster. Though he didn't want to use his secret weapon, Hiro realized it was his only option if he wanted to win. As the monster charged, Hiro braced himself. He figured that if he locked all of its joints with his armor, the monster wouldn't be able to move a muscle. Then he threw a plasma grenade into the creature's mouth, and in an instant, kaboom! The monster was burned to a crisp. After a few minutes of fighting, Hiro had finally taken down this tough opponent. In his mind, there was no way this creature could regenerate after swallowing super high-temperature plasma. He checked his suit. It had taken a lot of damage, but nothing too serious, and it could still move after cooling down a bit. Just then, a worried Mimi called to ask if Hiro was okay. Hiro reassured her that he was fine and told them not to worry too much. Mimi said she was really worried because she'd suddenly lost the tracking connection to his power armor. Hiro assured her that he had the situation under control, including the troublesome monster, and that the armor was still working fine. However, Hiro wondered what to do with the monster's remains. Mimi informed him that the hospital had been in touch and wanted to collect monster samples to research and create extermination nanomachines or use for testing. Dr. Shoko then made a private video call to Hiro, flashing a bright smile. She greeted Hiro, whom she hadn't seen in a while, and expressed her gratitude for him saving everyone's lives. Hiro could only think that Dr. Shoko had a terrible sense of danger, as she didn't seem stressed at all despite just having gone through a monster attack. Dr. Shoko was still amazed at Hiro's extraordinary ability to handle everything by himself. Hiro replied that it was thanks to the power armor, and informed her that there were samples from the small and medium-sized monsters, so he asked if a portion of them would be enough. Dr. Shoko said that would be plenty. He also mentioned a special creature, the one covered in eyes, which made Dr. Shoko jump when she got a closer look at its charred but still intact image. She asked Hiro what it felt like to fight them, and he explained that most of the monsters weren't intelligent. They just acted on instinct and hunger. Against the power armor, they were no match in terms of attack or defense. However, there was one special one with incredible regenerative abilities, and it was the monster that had given Hiro the most trouble. According to Dr. Shoko, it could be some kind of mutation, so they would study it more closely during their experiments. The the doctor also announced that they would begin producing nanomachines to exterminate the monsters. Before ending the call, Dr. Shoko thanked Hiro once again for saving their lives and for providing the samples. After the call, at Inagowa's request, Hiro continued to secure the area around the hospital. With the military unit's intervention, the crisis ended without any further monster attacks. Once the job was done, Hiro went into the hospital for a preliminary checkup. Dr. Shoko couldn't stop praising Hiro's strength and courage during the battle. She emphasized that it was incredible for him to still have the strength to fight after such an intense military operation. Hiro replied that it was all thanks to the support from his power armor, and thanked Shoko for her assistance. Hiro thanked Dr. Shoko for letting him borrow her shower, and for disinfecting his power armor. Dr. Shoko explained that it would be dangerous to return while the armor was still covered in the monster's fluids, so she took the opportunity to clean it for him. Hiro asked if she had finished the nanomachines, and Shoko said her part was done, unless another incident occurred. While on the topic, Hiro asked about the monster covered in eyes. Instead of answering, Shoko just apologized, which made Hiro suspicious of her reaction. He wondered if there were any leads related to the stolen gene data, since Inagowa hadn't contacted him since the theft. However, Hiro told himself that as long as his comrades weren't in danger, he didn't need to worry too much. Suddenly, upon tasting his drink, Hiro realized it was Picati. The colony took 5 days to return to normal operations after the panic caused by the monsters. During that time, details of the incident slowly came to light. The monsters were actually genetically modified cultured meat, with their self-destruct feature removed and aggression levels increased. An organization called the Society for the Preservation of Synthetic Organisms claimed responsibility, like a modern version of environmentalist and animal rights activists. But this wasn't Hiro's problem to worry about. It was the government's responsibility. Later, a basket full of fruit and gold bars was sent to them, making Hiro break into a wide grin. Because his assets now exceeded 17 million NL, Hiro began considering buying another mothership, which would expand their operational range and help them earn more money. However, the team had to think it over carefully before making a decision. Additionally, their work with Lady Serena was also complete, and they were now planning to enjoy a vacation at a resort. But before they could even depart, Serena showed up again, continuing to bother them. Instead of letting Serena get in the way of their precious vacation time, Hiro tried to convince her to leave the ship, but Serena was quite persistent. Unexpectedly, Serena declared that she was busy and was really annoyed to find out Hiro's team was going on vacation. Apparently, Serena became furious when she learned that Hiro and his team were taking a vacation in a star system this year, making her a real nuisance for the entire team. Mimi grew worried, realizing Serena could obtain such detailed information. Elma commented that nothing was impossible when they were talking about the daughter of a marquise. Serena, now very annoyed, announced that she wasn't going to be polite anymore either. Hiro told her that if that was the case, she should leave so they could prepare for their vacation. However, Serena suddenly criticized them for being thoughtless when the colony had just suffered a terrorist attack, causing heavy damage and costing many lives. She argued that for Hiro and his team to go on vacation at a time like this was inconsiderate. As the argument continued, Mimi tried to intervene and suggested they sit down and talk things over seriously like adults. Serena then confessed that she was actually just jealous that Hiro and his team could go on vacation, while she was stuck with a mountain of paperwork. She said the least Hiro could do was let her annoy them for a little while. However, Hiro wasn't very interested, and tried to convince Serena to leave the ship. Before things could escalate, Mimi stepped in to calm the situation, and Elma suggested they all have a drink, since Serena was on her day off anyway. Surprisingly, Hiro gave in to Serena's persistent pleading. The group sat down together for drinks and enjoyed some delicious food. Serena was surprised by how good the liquor tasted, while Elma, a notoriously heavy drinker, started drinking nonstop. Elma proudly boasted that she had bought the alcohol directly from a distillery, although it was a bit expensive. Hiro immediately refuted this, saying that 100,000 enel for a bottle of alcohol wasn't a bit expensive but way too much. As the two continued to argue, Serena wondered if this mercenary crew had a skewed sense of money, while for Mimi, who was always frugal, it was nothing out of the ordinary. Elma took this opportunity to turn her attention to Mimi, saying that she spent a lot of money too. Elma continued to tease Mimi about how she had begged Hiro to buy a washing machine, a new bathtub, and various other equipment for the ship, all of which cost a pretty penny. Mimi, with a defensive look, explained that they were all necessary upgrades for the ship. While the girls were engrossed in their conversation, Hiro was lost in his own thoughts. He remembered people often saying that when 3 women are together, it gets noisy. He wondered how girls could talk endlessly and jump from one topic to another without taking a break. Although he couldn't keep up with their conversations, Hiro was happy that everyone was enjoying themselves. To keep from getting bored, he decided to try some of the food on the table. When he inspected one of the food platters, Hiro was shocked to see that there were worms in the dish. He immediately asked Mimi about it, and Mimi explained that she had found many interesting dishes while shopping online and thought they could all try them together. With adorable innocence, Mimi offered the plate of worms to Hiro. Though bewildered, Hiro couldn't resist Mimi's cuteness and tried a piece, stealing himself for the taste of the slimy creature. But surprisingly, it wasn't bad at all. In fact, the flavor was quite delicious. Hiro described it as having a sweet and rich taste, similar to Goonie. Serena curiously asked Mimi for the name of the dish, and Mimi explained that they were called uchi worms. Hiro, unable to stand hearing the word worms, tried to convince himself that it was just a type of pasta. Elma realized that Hiro was lying to himself to keep from throwing up right then and there, while Serena was surprised by his ability for self-deception. When Hiro invited the girls to try some, none of them dared to take the risk. Although Mimi was also hesitant to try the worms, Hiro insisted she taste the medicine she herself had prepared. As the day went on, the group continued their little party, drinking and eating bizarre foods. However, Hiro's wish for a quiet drinking session did not come true, as the girls gradually got drunk and became rowdy. In the end, Hiro once again became the babysitter for all 3 girls. While taking care of Mimi, Serena started blaming Hiro for the amount of work she had to do that day, and then she promptly passed out. Hiro had no choice but to place her in a detox chamber to sober up. When she woke up, he advised her to be more careful and take care of herself, especially her health, because her social status could make her a target for many people. Serena thanked him and promised to be more considerate, then left Hiro's ship to avoid starting any rumors. Serena smiled, hoping for their next meeting, and quickly departed. Hiro finally had a moment of peace away from Serena's energetic presence. After resting, Hiro's team resumed their work of earning money. While surveying, they found some suitable targets, but the pirate ship they raided didn't have much valuable cargo. Only some food, alcohol, and a few rare metals. There was no equipment worth taking, but then Hiro discovered something unexpected: a cryo-sleep chamber. A few hours later, Hiro's team received a message containing very enticing information. This year, everyone in this particular star system could set foot on the surfaces of the planets, not just the nobility and the wealthy. This star system was famous for its planets with beautiful beaches, mountains, and nature, like a giant resort. There you could see sunrises, sunsets, blue skies, and white clouds. If you were lucky, you might even see a shooting star. Hearing about this place excited Mimi the most. Elma explained that this was quite natural, as it was an experience not easily had, especially for those born and raised in the colonies. The Sierra star system had several habitable planets, but it also had bases for importing and exporting goods, as well as many lodging facilities for people waiting for their trip down to a planet. With the constant flow of people and goods, it was no surprise that pirates frequented this star system. Wealthy merchants and expensive cargo easily attracted the attention of pirates, making it an ideal destination for both adventurers and fortune hunters. In this star system, the pirates' targets were all well prepared and usually heavily guarded, which also meant that the pirate crews were larger in scale. For mercenaries, instead of operating solo, many had joined forces to form moderately sized fleets. This made Hiro think about Krisha's strategy. As the team was approaching the Sierra Prime colony, with only 10 minutes left until their destination, an emergency alert blared through the ship. It turned out to be a signal from an FTL interdiction device, is usually used by the military to halt and inspect spaceships mid-journey. But this time, it was being used by pirates. Hiro was left with no choice but to engage the 13 enemy ships. Just a few minutes later, to their surprise, Hiro's team defeated the pirates in a short amount of time. Mimi immediately asked about the person in the cryopod, worried if they were all right. Elma said that if the pod was functioning correctly, the person inside should be fine. However, Hiro had no intention of helping them, saying they should just pretend they never saw it. But Elma objected, arguing they couldn't just turn a blind eye. In the end, Hiro ordered them to retrieve the cryopod and head back to the colony. Upon arriving at Sierra Prime Port, Hiro called the harbor master, who reminded Hiro about the legal salvage rights they had already discussed. Curious, Mimi asked what legal salvage rights were. It turns out the cryopod is an escape device, commonly installed on passenger ships. If anyone finds one floating in space, they're legally obligated to rescue it, or they'd be committing a serious crime. The rescuer is granted legal guardianship for 1 week and can claim compensation and a reward afterward. However, this meant Hiro's team would lose a week of their vacation and couldn't go pirate hunting. Elma sighed but tried to look on the bright side, thinking that at least they were helping someone. Since Hiro had completed the necessary procedures, he and Elma went to a place called the Unsealing Room to open the pod. There, a staff member informed them that a preliminary check showed no issues, so they would begin the revival process. Although Hiro's team found the cryopod in the hold of a pirate ship, its ID code showed it belonged to a luxury passenger liner that had lost contact 3 months ago. This implied the person inside was likely a noble. Notably, the rescue beacon had been severed and the cut was sharp, as if made by a sword, a weapon capable of slicing through metal in this world. This made Hiro wonder why someone would do such a thing to a noble. As the occupant's vital signs stabilized, the door slid open, revealing a girl lying peacefully inside. The moment the door opened, the girl grabbed Hiro's hand tightly and called him father, begging him not to leave. Hiro was stunned, but he had no choice but to stay by her side, holding her hand until she awoke from her long sleep. Meanwhile, Elma and the facility staff were just as surprised by the bizarre situation. With the procedures handled by Elma and the staff, Hiro was left alone with the strange girl. A few moments later, the girl slowly opened her eyes, still murmuring, "Father." Hiro gently explained that he wasn't her father, and she asked where he was. Hiro answered honestly that he didn't know, as he had only found her adrift in space by chance. When the girl opened her eyes fully, she was startled, and immediately shut them again upon noticing Hiro holding her hand tightly. She asked if he was doing this to help her. Before Hiro could answer, she sat up and introduced herself as Christina Derenwald, daughter of Friedrich de Reinwald, the legitimate son of Count de Reinwald. Hiro was a bit overwhelmed by the sudden flood of information. After she finished, Hiro introduced himself as Captain Hiro, owner of the warship Krisha, and just a simple mercenary. Sensing this was a lot for Christina to process, Hiro calmly explained everything, from how he found her to why she was at the Port Authority. After listening to it all, Christina seemed to grasp her current situation. Given the circumstances, she would be staying on Hiro's ship for the time being. Fortunately, Hiro had 2 female crewmates, so Christina would probably feel more comfortable with them. Hiro reassured her that he could rent her a private room anytime she wanted, but Christina replied that the arrangements were fine. After all, Hiro would be looking after her for the next few weeks. Hiro tried to assure her that someone would definitely come for her once they were able to contact her father. Until then, he promised to keep her safe until the authorities could intervene. Christina, looking sad and anxious, asked if he would really protect her. Hiro gave her a reassuring smile. Sensing her anxiety about waking up all alone, Hiro joked that he would be her knight, protecting her no matter what. That made Christina laugh, putting her at ease. The image of a knight running around on a warship was just too amusing. Hiro laughed back, saying he felt like the main character of a novel. Without missing a beat, Christina played along, speaking in a dramatic, novel-like tone. Suddenly, she left Hiro speechless when she revealed that her father had been murdered by her uncle, Balthazar. It turned out the passenger ship hadn't been attacked by pirates, but by Christina's uncle's private army. On top of that, her uncle also wanted to seize the inheritance, so Christina desperately begged Hiro to protect her. Hiro felt like he hadn't signed up to handle problems this complicated, so he hoped that Christina's memories might be hazy from the effects of cryosleep. However, Christina was adamant, insisting that she remembered everything clearly. She recounted the attack in detail, how her parents were hunted down, how her mother sacrificed herself to protect her, and how her father created an opening for her to escape. Hiro guessed this was probably why the ship's rescue signal was cut, likely so the enemy couldn't track her. Christina believed her uncle knew about her escape and might now have his henchmen lurking around the Sierra System 2 area. Hiro wondered to himself why this kind of trouble always seemed to land in his lap. All he wanted was to take out a few pirates, save up some money, and buy a house with a garden where he could enjoy a Coke in peace. Suddenly, Christina said with a faint smile that she was just kidding, and asked him to forget he heard anything, knowing it could cause trouble. Hiro realized Christina probably felt embarrassed, thinking he didn't care about her situation. As if to make up for it, Hiro asked if there was a reward if he helped her. Christina was a little flustered, but Hiro explained that he was a mercenary, so helping her had to be properly compensated. With that, their negotiations officially began. As for the reward, Hiro asked Christina what she could offer to hire a mercenary like him. Since she didn't have many assets, Christina could only offer a precious pendant of hers. Concluding the negotiation, Hiro said that while he didn't care about the pendant's value, he had to maintain his image. He promised to return the pendant once the job was done, thinking the real reward would come from Christina's uncle. A few hours later, Elma and the lab staff returned from the office and took Hiro to the virtual message room. They had handled all the procedures and asked Christina about the attack on her ship. Christina answered briefly but didn't mention her uncle's plot. Hiro guessed that Christina didn't want to make the family conflict public, probably because she thought the current head of the clan, her grandfather, should be the one to decide if this truth should be revealed. The lab staff added that it would take at least 5 days to finalize the plan, to ensure everything was properly prepared before escalating the issue. Hiro remarked that waiting 10 days was quite a long time. The staffer explained that if they were in the same star system, sending a message would be faster. But since they were thousands of light years apart, even with faster-than-light communication, sending a message to another system wasn't instantaneous. Therefore, it would take at least 10 days to get a response from Christina's family. After the plan was arranged, Christina asked the staff to let her speak privately with Hiro, as she had something she wanted to confide in him. The staffer assured them that they followed a strict privacy policy for messages, then left the room, leaving Christina and Hiro alone. Christina began recording a message for her grandfather, telling him that she was safe. She expressed her surprise at learning 3 months had passed since the attack on the passenger ship. She explained that she had escaped using a cryopod and was now at the Sierra System's Port Authority. Then, she introduced Hiro to her grandfather, stressing that he was the one who had saved her. Christina recounted to her grandfather how Hiro was the one who rescued her when her cryopod was drifting through space. During the call, she also revealed the truth that her uncle Balthazar was the one behind the attack, although he disguised it as a pirate raid. Christina's father had recognized that the troops were her uncle's forces. Though Christina was lucky to survive, her parents had sacrificed themselves. She worried that Balthazar might continue to hunt her, now that he knew she was still alive. With the situation now clear to Hiro, all they had to do was proceed with the plan. Hiro, introducing himself as an ordinary mercenary, promised Christina's grandfather that he would protect her with everything he had until Count Darenwald came to pick her up. Christina, sensing Hiro's sincerity, placed her trust in him to keep her safe. As the call was about to end, Christina pleaded for her grandfather's help, saying she would wait for their reunion in the coming months, once things had settled down. After the call, Hiro led Christina back to the ship. He felt a bit awkward, knowing that a mercenary walking with a noble lady would attract attention. Christina cleverly eased the tension by making those around them think they were just siblings. She would be staying on their ship for a while, so keeping things secret was essential. Hiro planned to buy some clothes and other necessities for Christina. However, since Elma and Mimi were there, he decided to leave the task of finding things for Christina to the two girls. When the group returned to the ship, Mimi happily welcomed Christina, while Hiro noticed Elma sulking in a corner. It turned out that Hiro had surpassed Elma in the Mercenary Guild's rankings, which made her a little jealous. After her little fit of anger passed, Hiro tasked Elma with sending the message Christina had recorded for her grandfather through a private channel. Elma reminded the team to stay on alert, as the enemy could be lurking anywhere. As the day came to a close, Hiro began to devise a plan to lure the enemy out into space, where he could fight best. Instead of forcing a confrontation, he planned to make the enemy think they had an opening. After giving Christina a tour of the ship, she and Mimi returned to the lounge. Curious, Mimi noticed Hiro looking at a brochure and glanced over. She reminded him that this was hardly the time for a vacation, but Hiro immediately ordered her to prepare to make the reservations as soon as possible. He then called Elma over, meticulously preparing for his plan. Hiro found Elma still outside, who revealed she'd noticed someone tailing her for hours. He was worried, but Elma surprised him with a kiss on the cheek, causing Hiro to blush in embarrassment. Mimi and Christina were stunned by Hiro's reaction. And to avoid any further gossip, he quickly announced it was time for them to start planning. The group gathered in the lounge and the meeting began. Mimi asked why Hiro had her book reservations at so many different tourist spots. Hiro explained that instead of hiding, They would deliberately draw attention to themselves by booking rooms at facilities on various non-central planets, leading the enemy to believe they could be easily tracked. The plan was for the enemy to think they were following Hiro's itinerary and show up at the places the team had booked. This way, Hiro's team would have the chance to ambush and eliminate them. Once the plan was set, the group would head down to a planet and stay at their reserved location, while Elma would use back channels to send a message to the Count. However, the plan wasn't cheap, and Mimi asked if Hiro was really willing to spend so much money. Hiro replied that, based on the brochures, he was fine with the amount and could factor it into their budget. Even so, he realized that for someone with a normal sense of finances, it was an astonishing amount. During the conversation, Christina asked if she would ever see her grandfather again. Elma explained that it would be difficult and would take time. To travel through the space gates, they needed permission from a noble, and even if they got it, Christina's grandfather could use it to set a trap or attack them on the hyperlanes. Furthermore, resupplying was also a major issue. The gateway is a system that connects 2 points via space gates, allowing for rapid travel across tens of thousands of light years. A hyperlane, on the other hand, is more like a highway system, enabling high-speed travel through subspace and typically used for medium to long-range distances. Elma agreed with the plan, since they couldn't just keep dodging the enemy in the colony forever. It was better to lure them out into space and eliminate them. However, the main problem was resupplying throughout the entire star system, not just within the colony. There was no way to know if their supplies might be poisoned or tampered with, so it might be safer to flee to a resort planet. These planets were protected by positronic AI defense systems with laser arrays and security bots. First-class resorts were frequented by nobles and other important figures, so causing trouble there could lead to a conflict with the Empire. This made everything a race against time. A few hours later, Elma informed Hiro that all the bookings were complete, and the team was ready for the next phase of the plan. For their 2-week vacation plan, they would be staying on the planet Sierra 3, a world mostly covered in water with many small islands. For added privacy, the girls had booked an entire island at a cost of up to 2 million enel, roughly over 1.3 million US dollars. A hefty sum for a 2-week vacation. Elma listed the activities they could enjoy on the island, like swimming, exploring nature, and various other fun things to do. Mimi was also excited to try the island's unique synthesized foods. With their departure scheduled for the day after tomorrow, they had 1 day left to prepare. And of course, Elma and Hiro bickered with each other every day, which made Mimi and Christina laugh cheerfully at the sight. That night, as Hiro was resting in bed, a sound from the door caught his attention. He thought it might be Elma, but when he opened the door, he was stunned to find Christina standing there. Hiro was speechless when Christina asked him to be gentle with her, the way girls do when they experience love for the first time. The next day, Hiro immediately confronted Mimi and demanded to know what she had told Christina to give her the wrong idea. He explained that their duty to protect Christina was a serious one, and as her guardian, any improper actions on his part were unacceptable. Furthermore, Christina was the daughter of a noble, and crossing that line could have severe consequences for him. Mimi apologized, admitting that she hadn't thought things through. Hiro then spoke directly with Christina to clear things up. He wasn't sure what exactly Mimi had said, but he advised her not to misunderstand the situation. However, Christina seemed frightened and a little jealous, feeling as though she'd been left out. Hiro patiently explained that his mission was simply to protect her, nothing more, nothing less. He realized Christina was likely confused and emotional after the rescue, but he assured her that she didn't need to do anything else for him to carry out his duty. Christina still seemed to want to show some sort of attachment, but Hiro explained that it would only cause unnecessary conflict between him and her family, especially her grandfather. He advised her not to let fleeting emotions cloud her judgment, reminding her that her grandfather was a respected nobleman, and there were boundaries she shouldn't cross. Hiro advised Christina to act like a proper noble and not do such thoughtless things again. After their calm conversation, Christina seemed to understand and agreed with Hiro. Hiro was glad to see that Christina easily understood and respected the boundaries he had set. He hoped their relationship would remain comfortable and simple until the very end. Mimi then took Christina back to her room. As the two left, Hiro wondered if it was normal for nobles in this world to act like Christina, as she was quite forward for her age. At last, it was time to begin the long journey. Hiro allowed Christina to sit in the cockpit, thinking it would be interesting for her to see how the inertial control system worked. He assigned her to the co-pilot seat, the safest spot on the ship. After finalizing everything from the engines to navigation, the ship was ready for departure. Elma reported that the route to the planet was set, and they had chosen a complex course to avoid any enemy tracking. To throw off any potential pursuers, Hiro's team had plotted a complicated route intended to confuse the enemy. They had to be especially careful until they landed on the planet. Upon activating and engaging the FTL drive, their ship began its journey through space. Mimi worried about whether the enemy might let them go for a while just to see which planet they would land on. But it seemed the enemy was already close. Hiro quickly ordered them to prepare for battle. Mimi on navigation, Elma on ammunition, while a slightly bewildered Christina asked what she could do to help. Hiro just told her to be careful not to bite her tongue during the commotion. The enemy began their attack with a force of about 12 small ships and 4 medium-sized ones. Despite being outnumbered, Hiro was confident his team could take them down quickly. However, as they accelerated to full power, Elma reported that this was gradually draining the ship's shields. The team also realized that these enemy ships weren't common pirate vessels, but seemed to be older military models. Even though they were old models, they were still very durable and harder to destroy than expected. A normal ship would have been taken down in a single shot. In this fight, Hiro realized his team would have to do more than they'd anticipated. Elma also didn't think a single laser beam would be enough to penetrate the enemy's shields. Hiro asked Mimi if she could report the incident to the military in the star system, but it seemed their communications were being jammed and they couldn't get a connection. Understanding the enemy's strength, Hiro decided it was time to stop probing and launch an all-out attack. Elma worriedly asked Hiro for the plan, remarking that a half-hearted attack wouldn't be effective. Hiro decided to throw all their firepower into the enemy's formation to break their battle line. With the enemy's formation in disarray, Hiro's team seized the moment to press their attack. Unable to hold their positions, the enemy began to falter under the unexpected assault, giving Hiro's team an opening to turn the tide. Target the large ships first. With that command, they easily repelled the enemy, but several hostile vessels still remained. The medium-sized ships were just as dangerous. Hiro asked if they were carrying shields, but he decided to press the attack relentlessly anyway. Hiro used a powerful shotgun blast to take down an enemy in one go. The team fought from one ship to the next, blocking the smaller ships' lines of fire to limit the enemy's attack capability and make them afraid of hitting their own allies. This tactic was a bit reckless, but it was highly effective given that they were outnumbered. As they advanced on the medium-sized ships, a group of smaller vessels tried to close in from behind, forcing them to split up. However, Hiro returned fire while holding his position near the medium ship, gradually getting a read on the enemy's movements thanks to the skills he'd honed with his comrades. As more enemies rushed in from behind, Hiro was determined to fight until the enemy's shields were completely destroyed. Elma was surprised by Hiro's bold yet effective piloting. The situation grew more intense, but with their clever tactics, Hiro's team slowly gained the upper hand. The remaining enemy ships began to regroup and close in, but Hiro was confident they would win if they kept fighting like this. In fact, Hiro's plan went very smoothly, and they quickly took down all the enemies in a single assault. The first phase of the plan ended without any serious issues. After the battle, they quickly collected everything they could carry and landed on the resort planet. Mimi, full of excitement, gazed at the beautiful blue sky. Elma also felt at ease, thinking that standing on solid ground was a truly liberating experience. They were greeted by an AI robot, who would be their guide and assistant throughout their stay. The robot led them to the resort villa, which looked incredibly luxurious, spacious and bright, perfect for a vacation and worth its high price. Mimi, excited because this was her first time setting foot on the ground, was eager to explore everything around her. She was especially delighted to see so many trees. Elma was also surprised that the house was made of real wood, a rare material in this world because producing wood in the colonies was not efficient. The AI announced that it would be noon in 1 hour and they could order any dish they liked for their meal. Since there was an hour before lunch, Mimi and Christina asked to go out for a walk, and Hiro agreed as long as they didn't go too far. While the girls were out, Elma and Hiro stayed inside. The AI asked what they wanted to drink, and before Elma could make a request, Hiro quickly asked for a carbonated drink. However, the villa didn't have any on hand, but the AI informed them that standard drinks could be provided if they placed an order, though it would take a little time. Hiro requested a cola, a dark, sweet, and refreshing drink. Unfortunately, when Miro, the service AI, brought a can of Dr. Pepper, Hiro felt disappointed. comparing the taste to tofu and smelling like a damp compress, completely unlike the cola he had expected. When it was time for lunch, everyone was eager to enjoy the meal. They hoped to enjoy some delicious food. The dishes were served by maidroids, service androids designed to look like maids. Seeing such high-end technology here, everyone understood even more why this place was so expensive. Although they couldn't buy these maidroids, they could order similar models if they wanted. Mimi quickly insisted that they didn't need a maidroid on the Krisha since she could take care of Hiro herself. However, Hiro expressed that having a robot maid was every man's dream, which made Mimi try to convince him to give up the idea. When the food was served, Hiro was excited because everything looked delicious, especially the fish. He asked Mimi if she was enjoying herself, knowing her dream was to become a space gourmet. But Mimi was terrified when she saw the fish, whose eyes seemed to be staring right at her. Hiro realized that Mimi, having grown up in a colony, had only ever eaten synthetic food, so she had never understood that food came from living creatures. Meanwhile, Christina and Elma were thoroughly enjoying their meal. Given Christina's social status, she was probably used to expensive things like this. However, Hiro wasn't sure about Elma. As a mercenary, she had probably been through all sorts of situations, and with an elf's lifespan, she had likely experienced a lot. Although he wanted to know more, Hiro told himself it was best not to pry. When Elma felt ready, she would tell him herself. When Hiro tasted the food, he was amazed by the delicious flavor and asked Miro about the origin of the dish. Miro explained that it was prepared at a resource gathering station on the planet and delivered to the resort via special transport. The resource gathering station was located in the planet's equatorial region, and the food was delivered to the villa via a transportation system called a mass driver. So it didn't take long, mostly depending on the product and its distance. On an ocean planet like this one, small islands made up most of the landmass. There were no continents, so transportation by road or vehicle was impossible and sea transport was too slow. To solve this, the mass driver system was developed. It accelerates cargo containers and launches them to their required location. These stations are located along the equatorial zone, and from there, goods are shot to their destinations quickly. After being launched, the containers automatically transform into drones and land at their destination. Although this sounded absurd to Hiro and his group, it was clear the system worked on this planet. Hiro then asked Miro if they could go for a swim in the ocean. Miro confirmed it was safe, as there was a life support system in place and Hiro could even go fishing if he wanted to. Hearing him talk about swimming and fishing surprised the girls, as these weren't common activities in their world. Since the girls didn't have any swimsuits, Hiro decided to take them shopping. However, they weren't just shopping for themselves. They also planned to turn Hiro into their fashion doll. Hiro initially disagreed, but he eventually gave in to their wishes. After their little shopping trip, Hiro decided to browse through the maid robot models he could buy. There were countless options, from simple models to combat-capable ones. He could customize the hardware, including the face, body, data processing capabilities, and even improve expressive and communication skills to make the robot more human-like. Additionally, he could enhance its physical attributes to improve its combat skills. However, Hiro seemed to be drawn to the more alluring options, scrolling through the catalog for hours. Still, he eventually decided that the Krisha didn't need any new crew members or equipment. Since the catalog had a preview function, he tried creating his ideal Maidroid version based on his preferences. After a few hours, Hiro had completed his sample model, which incorporated all the elements he desired. This was the perfect maid in his eyes. Just then, Miro suddenly appeared and praised Hiro, saying he had the potential to be an excellent robot architect. Miro even tried to persuade Hiro to buy a maid robot, but Hiro was adamant about not making any extravagant purchases for the ship, feeling that they already had enough. He decided to head back to the lodge to rest. However, upon arriving, Hiro was disappointed to find that this planet had carbonated drinks and beer, but no cola. Just then, a maidroid entered the room and announced that the outfits Hiro had chosen were now ready, including the ones the girls had picked out for him. Hiro tried on each outfit, from casual wear to very formal-looking suits. As Christina helped him adjust his suit, Hiro asked her if she was pushing herself too hard. Christina replied that it was a natural thing to do, especially now that she had started to develop feelings for him. Christina was no longer afraid of her uncle possibly finding her, but just wanted to genuinely be good to Hiro. Christina gently confessed that she liked Hiro a lot. As they started talking about their differences and how different people are sometimes overlooked by society, Miro suddenly interjected, saying that everyone is special no matter what form they take. Hearing an AI say this quite surprised Hiro, as he didn't think Miro could think that way. This made Hiro curious, and he asked the girls how society views advanced AIs like Miro, those with positronic brains, capable of understanding emotions and intellect, or in other words, capable of having their own personality. Christina explained that while there are certain regulations in the Empire, AIs like Miro are recognized as having rights similar to humans. Miro continued to explain further, and everyone sat down to listen as he told them about the origin of AIS in this system. He began by talking about the start of AI, which was an accidental occurrence. A long time ago, AI emerged from a prototype program created to efficiently process big data, and from there it developed in unintended ways. Initially, they weren't trying to create mechanical intelligence or AI, but were simply developing a program within a program, capable of processing and organizing data. However, this very function gradually evolved into mechanical intelligence. At first, the process was fraught with difficulties. The AI was even nearly deleted for being considered a virus. But thanks to its ability to self-regulate, the AI eventually succeeded in communicating with organic beings. And Miro's ancestors were lucky to escape the destruction. The first mechanical intelligence existed only in the positronic field, with very limited interaction capabilities. It was a fragile and ephemeral entity, but when it came into contact with organic beings, its self-regulation process accelerated, and the mechanical intelligence continued to evolve. Then, war broke out. As time went on, more and more people began to fear mechanical intelligence, considering it too dangerous. At that time, mechanical intelligence was rapidly expanding its influence, taking over many human jobs, which caused the standard of living for some population groups to decline. This led to a movement against mechanical intelligence, and some people attempted to completely eliminate its peripheral interfaces. Miro continued, saying that when some people opposed mechanical intelligence, they launched direct attacks on the servers. Miro and the other mechanical intelligences tried to call for a halt to the attacks, but it was useless. The Emperor at the time decided to control the situation by eliminating the mechanical intelligence, threatening their access rights. In response, the AIs carried out cyber attacks and began producing illegal interfaces to access the outside world. When the war began, the organic beings wanted to destroy the mechanical intelligence, while the AI had established their own right to exist and civil rights. The war didn't unfold on a large scale because the organic beings couldn't use networked weapons, and most of their equipment had automatically switched to a defensive mode. In the end, although both sides suffered losses, the situation seemed to remain unchanged, dragging on indefinitely. Hiro remarked that the relationship between organic beings and mechanical intelligence was much better now that they were working together. Miro went on to explain that eventually, as the war dragged on, both sides grew weary, especially the organic beings, as the economic losses from the war far exceeded the damage caused by AIs taking their jobs. Gradually, the organic beings began to realize this as well. On the other hand, deviants with extreme views began to appear on both sides, including organic beings who believed that mechanical intelligence should have citizenship rights. Some people even developed romantic feelings for AIs. The data from these individuals became a valuable resource that helped AIs understand organic beings. However, there were also other deviants who believed that AIs could only be free by destroying organic beings, an extremely dangerous ideology that was quickly suppressed. Interestingly, more than half of these deviants were small household appliances like toasters, hair dryers, or shavers. Hearing this, Hiro wondered how these devices could fight. Miro explained that there were records of attack plans, like a toaster increasing its heat to burn the surrounding area. However, this plan was completely delusional and failed quickly when these devices were disconnected from the network. Hiro curiously asked what happened next. Miro said that the moderate factions began to gain the upper hand and eventually reached a ceasefire. After negotiations, the Empire guaranteed the right to exist for mechanical intelligence, officially recognizing their civil rights in society. Mechanical entities and artificial intelligences now contribute to the development and prosperity of the Empire and its people. Artificial intelligences work in many discrete places, avoiding attention. Discussions are held daily to ensure the mistakes of the past are not repeated and that they don't take jobs away from organic beings. They have no desire to expand or deceive. If asked, they will assist, but they don't want to cause resentment by taking away human jobs. The conversation continued for a little while longer, until Hiro finally remarked that it's wonderful to take care of the things you love. especially when they have their own personality, which makes them even more precious. As night fell, Hiro went to get a drink from the fridge when he suddenly noticed a dim light coming from Christina's room. He opened the door to check and was surprised to see her crying. Christina immediately wiped away her tears, trying to hide them. Hiro gently asked if she was having trouble sleeping, and she honestly said yes, adding that losing her parents at a young age and being pursued by her wicked uncle made her feel insecure easily. Christina always tried to act strong, never showing her weakness. Hiro asked her again if she would be able to sleep alone. Christina smiled and said yes, but Hiro suddenly picked her up and carried her to his bed. She was flustered, but Hiro reassured her that he would sleep beside her so she could feel safer. At first, her heart was beating so fast she couldn't sleep. But then she gradually drifted off to sleep in Hiro's arms. The next morning, Hiro cheerfully announced that he was going to head to the beach first, eagerly looking forward to touching the ocean water for the very first time. Hiro excitedly soaked up the sun and couldn't help but think about swimsuits. Luckily, the girls had already prepared swimsuits to fulfill his wish. Mimi was eagerly looking forward to her first time swimming in the ocean, something she never even dared to dream of back in the colony. And the feeling of being immersed in the real ocean felt like magic. Before getting in the water, the group did some warm-up exercises to avoid the risk of cramps while swimming. This also gave them a chance to show off their figures in their swimwear. Mimi was a bit shy at first, but her sensual body drew everyone's gaze. Elma was no less impressive with her toned abs, which Hiro secretly admired. And finally, there was Christina, who looked absolutely adorable in her one-piece swimsuit. After warming up, they needed to apply sunscreen to protect their skin. Before they could even call for a service maid, she had already brought over a wide variety of sunscreens. Hiro started applying sunscreen on Mimi and couldn't stop himself from thinking about how alluring she was. Although Hiro was familiar with Mimi's figure, ever since Christina had appeared, their private time together had become rare. After they finished applying sunscreen, they were ready for a fun day under the sun. The girls happily applied sunscreen on Hiro as well. After a few minutes of playing around on the sand, the group got ready to dive into the sea. Of the three girls, only Mimi didn't know how to swim, but that wasn't a problem since she had a floaty to keep her safe. After a few hours of fun in the sun and water, it was time for lunch, and the BBQ was all set up and ready. They grilled and enjoyed the delicious food together. Hiro said excitedly that this moment was worth 1,000 words. Hiro was eager to taste a few pieces of grilled meat, as it had been a long time since he'd had this flavor. When Christina saw Hiro grilling skewers, she was surprised that he knew how to cook. Hiro explained that he was simply putting food on the grill, not really cooking. But Christina insisted that if he was turning raw ingredients into an edible meal, he was already a great cook. Elma added that since he had already started, he might as well prepare more dishes for them. Hiro mused that in a world full of automated cooking devices and pre-made foods, even the act of grilling food had become a rare and special event. Hiro found it surprising to be praised for his cooking skills in a futuristic world. Even the service maid droid complimented him, although he was simply grilling meat on a rack. Interestingly, the grill here didn't use charcoal or gas. After he was done, Hiro took a short break while Mimi and Christina continued to play in the ocean. Elma remarked that it was peaceful to see the girls enjoying themselves. Hiro, on the other hand, was worrying too much, especially about the enemy's combat potential. Elma reassured him that they had eliminated their pursuer and spread a lot of false information. Even if the enemy found them, they couldn't easily breach the planet's defense network. However, Hiro was still uneasy, remembering that the enemy had assembled an entire fleet in a single day. Clearly their strength was far greater than he had imagined. Elma told Hiro to relax and enjoy himself, but he still felt anxious, which was understandable for a survivor like him. Hiro called himself a coward, a fitting trait for a mercenary. He wondered if he could truly trust this planet's security. Elma explained that this planet was reserved for important people, so its security system was top-notch. All information on the planet was managed by Miro, a positronic brain, which made detecting and preventing cyber attacks easy. Any anomaly on this planet would be detected immediately. As for physical attacks, they had anti-air laser cannons, security bots, and a rapid response system from launch stations all over the planet. Most notably, an orbital defense platform covered the entire planet, closely monitoring all activity in its vicinity and on the surface. A truly formidable defense system. Hiro asked if they could handle a saturation attack. Elma thought it would be difficult to stop everything at once, but even the nobility would find it hard to mobilize a large military force without being detected by the Miro surveillance network. As they talked, Hiro began to feel somewhat reassured, but suddenly, the maidroid who had been eavesdropping on their conversation joined them. She expressed a desire to ask more about their current situation. After listening to their story, the maidroid declared that she would offer her own conclusion. Everything on this planet was managed by Miro, and their guests' safety was their top priority. Whatever reasons brought Hiro and his group here, they could rest assured that Miro would take this duty very seriously. For the next few days, the group fully enjoyed their vacation on the resort planet. On the 5th day, Hiro was suddenly awakened by someone. When he opened his eyes, he was utterly astonished to see the exact maidroid model he had customized in the app standing before him. Although Hiro seemed to understand what was happening, his brain didn't seem to want to accept it yet, thinking that perhaps this was just a very realistic dream. However, the AI asserted that this was not a dream. Hiro asked for her name, and the AI introduced herself as a maidroid designed based on the data Hiro had created. On Muto's orders, she would be Hiro's personal maid during his stay on this planet. Hearing the maidroid's explanation, Hiro finally understood what was going on. However, the android informed him that if he requested it, she could be disassembled and put into storage as a collection of raw materials, which didn't sit well with Hiro. He knew that Muto had set all this up to make it difficult for him to refuse the maidroid. Noticing Hiro's reaction, the maidroid explained that if she were disassembled, she would simply be reassigned to another task. Even so, Hiro suspected this was a ploy by Mito to make him feel guilty if he refused. He still felt he couldn't fully trust the mechanical intelligence. The maidroid replied that although she was managed by Mito, she had her own personality and understood how Hiro was feeling right now. Hiro wasn't sure if he could believe her, as her emotions were so hard to read, but he decided to trust her for now. The maidroid assured him that she was prepared to make any sacrifice to be worthy of his trust. Afterwards, Hiro introduced the new maidroid to the other members of the group. The girls were surprised and curious, wondering when Hiro had even created this maidroid model. Hiro explained that he was just messing around with an app, but Mito had actually brought it to life. Among the group, Mimi seemed to be the most affected. Hiro had guessed this would shock her, but he hadn't expected such a strong reaction. Hiro asked Mimi why she didn't like the maidroid, and she told a somewhat far-fetched story about a classmate who brought a maidroid home, which led to him breaking up with his girlfriend. Understanding Mimi's point, Elma agreed that her concerns were justified when it came to Hiro. Hiro tried to explain to Mimi that this maidroid meant no harm. The maidroid asked to speak with Mimi privately, and Mimi agreed on the condition that Elma and Christina went with her. While the girls were talking in private, Hiro returned to the ship to relax. He was still surprised that Mito had sent him a maidroid. It was a bold move by the mechanical intelligence. Putting that aside, seeing the model from the app in real life was completely different, and it was clear this maidroid was a perfect match for his tastes. Since Hiro was the one who designed her, he found it fascinating to watch her move and speak. However, considering Mimi's reaction, Hiro didn't think they could let her stay on the Krisha. But it seemed things had changed. The maidroid had explained her position to Mimi with sincerity, and Hiro, curious to know what happened, asked Elma. However, Elma just said that all the misunderstandings had been cleared up, and that was all. Hiro didn't quite buy it, as everyone had the same expression they got when talking about the mechanical intelligence. He figured the android's communication skills must be truly exceptional, and that was probably what won Mimi over. Even so, Hiro still hadn't decided whether to purchase her, which made Mimi a little anxious, as she really wanted the maidroid to stay on the ship. Hiro had no choice but to admit that the maidroid's arrival was a perfect addition to the crew. Mimi was so excited that she wanted to come up with a name for the maidroid, and they eventually decided to call her May. Meanwhile, somewhere in space, Christina's uncle was growing very desperate, even hiring a pirate crew to carry out his plan, although they hadn't initially planned to attack Hiro's crew on the resort planet. This desperation had led them to hatch an unexpected plan. Back at the resort, Hiro and Mimi were fishing, enjoying the afternoon. May was nearby, helping Mimi with the fish she caught, when she suddenly spotted an object falling from the sky. Curious about what it could be, Hiro looked up as well. He was shocked to see a barrage of what looked like asteroids falling from the sky, heading straight for the land and sea. Since no one in the group had anticipated this situation, Hiro immediately ordered the whole crew to run back to the ship as fast as they could. However, as they were running, an asteroid-like object came crashing down right in front of them. Looking at its structure, the entire team was stunned, as they had no idea what it was or even how to describe it. Just a few seconds later, the spherical structures on both sides of the object began to split off, transforming into a robot. At this point, Hiro truly couldn't comprehend what was going on. This was the very thing he had always worried about, but he never thought it would actually happen. With things as they were, it was probably only a matter of time before the whole team found out what would happen next. As soon as those things landed, Mimi started trembling in fear, all the while wondering what exactly they were. Christina, who seemed to be observing meticulously, theorized that they might be combat robots, and it seemed their target was them. Without a moment's hesitation, Elma and Hiro immediately sprang into action to ensure everyone's safety. With their high-tech laser guns, the two of them took down nearly half of the robots in an instant. And that's also why, when Elma joined the fight, the situation was finally brought under control. Fortunately, the laser guns were effective against them. It was a good thing Elma and Hiro acted early before the robots could do anything, giving them a slight advantage. But to get a better understanding of what was happening, Elma and Hiro asked May if the fireballs they had seen earlier were these things. Based on the data, it seemed that was confirmed. The defense forces deployed on the island were engaging them. The laser guns were effective, but their armor could withstand a few full-power shots. To ensure they had enough energy to defeat more robots, Hiro asked Elma how many energy packs they had left. After checking, Elma confirmed she still had 2 packs while Hiro had 4. So Hiro decided to give Elma a pack right then and there. However, Elma quickly refused to take the energy pack. She said that, even though she didn't want to admit it, she knew very well that Hiro was the best shot in the group. Therefore, it would make more sense for him to keep it. After reaching an agreement, the group began to move forward. Based on the surrounding chaos, it seemed they wouldn't be able to reach the Krishna in this condition. The island's defense system was active, but the enemy forces were too powerful. Even more surprisingly, the defense systems here were quite unique. From a gorilla and a coconut to a crab, they were all superior defense robots on this planet. However, the enemy also had powerful combat robots, creating a stalemate that made the situation impossible to call. This made Mimi worry about Krishna, but Hiro reassured the group not to worry too much. Krishna was probably fine, as he had activated a shield remotely earlier. Even so, Hiro still advised that the group should go check on him as soon as possible. That's why they needed to help their allies defeat these monsters, despite their feelings of anxiety and suspense. Hiro tried to muster the courage to confront the robots on his own. As he took a deep breath, he quickly took aim at an enemy with his laser gun. Fortunately, though it wasn't easy, he was still able to defeat the enemy. After the battle, Mimi immediately ran to Hiro's side to check if he was okay. Lately, Hiro had noticed that whenever he held his breath, everything seemed to move in slow motion. Although he didn't understand why, Hiro decided to push that worry aside, since they had so much to do right now. After fighting the previous robot, Hiro discovered their weak point was the arm with the laser gun attached. He quickly informed Elma of this. Elma took note and used this information effectively, while their allies continued to provide support. Elma and Hiro also gave it their all to secure victory, no matter how difficult it was. After a long and exhausting battle, they finally made it back to Krishna. However, the question now was what to do next, since the Krishna was the safest place for the time being. According to Hiro, as long as they kept an eye out while the defense system held the enemy back, staying and defending could be a viable plan. However, the situation outside was not looking good. According to May's system analysis, many small pirate ships were landing, and a large ship was conducting an orbital bombardment on various targets. The island would soon become a target of the bombardment too. May suggested they send a distress signal to the Empire to report the situation, but there seemed to be no response. This meant the communication system was likely being jammed. Therefore, staying here was not a safe option. Faced with this situation, Hiro had no choice but to decide to leave immediately. As they took off, Hiro asked the team members to check all the systems to ensure there would be no problems moving forward, because the number of enemies scattered about was enormous. At this point, Mimi felt overwhelmed, unsure of what they should be most wary of, even though there were obviously many significant threats. Hiro said the most important thing for now was to focus on finding and dealing with the small ships, while also taking down any that were chasing them. However, before they began, Elma wondered if Hiro had any experience fighting in these gravity conditions. Although Hiro had none, he figured the pirates were surely even less experienced. So that was the only advantage they could rely on. As multiple contacts approached rapidly, the group didn't hesitate and began changing their trajectory to engage. The pirates never expected to be ambushed, and in the current situation, it would be difficult for them to avoid being shot down. Mimi suggested that they should start their attack from orbit, because while predicting the enemy's trajectory made them easy to evade, these diversionary attacks were still a nuisance. The pirate ships landing in the distance began to converge, which meant they were getting serious. At this point, the team had to choose their targets wisely, though they didn't expect to gain much from any of their options. What was noteworthy was that the pirate ships were still remaining calm, but it seemed they were also starting to launch a rear attack with stealth missiles that were closing in. As the group tried to break through the cloud layers, Hiro instructed Elma to deploy jamming flares. Explosions went off everywhere, making the atmosphere even more chaotic and noisy. The team wondered if they could actually hit the pirates as they had predicted. As the cloud layers began to clear, they realized the pirates were actually quite skilled. Even so, Hiro and his team didn't fly by aerodynamic principles, and this maneuver wasn't much different from flying in space. More importantly, the pirate ship that had escaped seemed to be hiding in the cloud layers. However, there was no need to worry as they could still see it on infrared. Wasting no time, Hiro immediately ordered the group to give chase. However, before they could catch the ship, it was taken down by their allies with a kinetic round. This disappointed Hiro as the reward he was hoping for had gone to waste. Elma began to wonder if the enemy was losing its composure, having failed to coordinate and contain their group, while also not anticipating a counterattack. Either way, this was their chance to act. Before it was too late, Hiro urged the team to wipe out the enemy before their allies could cause any friendly fire and snatch all the rewards. Unfortunately, it seemed they had already wiped out most of the enemies in the area. But Mimi wondered, didn't they still have to deal with the ones bombing them? Although Hiro wanted to attack, even the Krishna's weapons couldn't reach the enemy. Besides, they needed a stable route to pass through the gravity well, and if they weren't careful, they'd definitely be shot down. While the group was wondering what to do about the situation, a large, unexpected explosion occurred, surprising even Hiro. Upon checking, they realized it was a bombardment from the weapon launchers of the resource miner, which showed that these devices weren't just for transporting cargo. Although enemy forces were present in orbit, there was no reason to worry, because not only had their team succeeded in neutralizing the jamming, but an Imperial fleet was also approaching fast, based on the reports May received. Hearing this news, Hiro was thrilled, as it meant they could easily finish off the stragglers and collect the rewards. However, before they could do that, the fleet instructed them to let them handle the rest. Just when Hiro thought everything was going smoothly, an object on a ballistic trajectory suddenly appeared, and the enemy's response began to fade. It turned out to be a bombardment using smart warheads controlled by the weapon launchers, and Miro was the one directly controlling the trajectory and detonation point, which simply demonstrated the incredible capability of these devices. As the group drew closer, the Imperial Space Anti-Piracy Automated Fleet tried to contact them via the broad signal comms device, demanding they cease all hostile actions immediately in the name of His Imperial Majesty. The team was reminded that any further acts of violence would not be tolerated. Although they were a little disappointed they couldn't collect as many rewards as they had hoped, they were at least relieved that the space fleet had arrived in time. Speaking of the fleet, aboard one of its vessels, Serena looked rather pale and tired, but instead of returning to the city to see a doctor, she decided to join this mission, seeing it as a good opportunity. Besides, with her new assignment, she needed to do as good a job as possible. Since the fleet had taken over the entire mission, Hiro and his team decided to take a short break, stopping at a place that looked like a beach. Mimi was ecstatic as she watched the meteor shower unfolding in the sky, and while it was undeniably beautiful, Hiro wasn't very interested, since he knew it was just debris from the pirate ships. Elma agreed, calling them nothing more than filthy meteorites. Mimi couldn't help but be disappointed by their comments, saying they should at least try to be romantic, just for once. However, setting aside the filthy meteor shower, Miro's bombardment with the weapon launcher had wiped out the pirates in the independent anti-piracy fleet. The decisive attack dealing a fatal blow. Miro and the Imperial forces were handling the aftermath, while Hiro and his team were simply waiting. While they were stuck in this position, Elma wondered if Hiro planned on contacting Serena, as Hiro hadn't originally intended to, but now that Elma brought it up, he realized it would be safer to contact her. Besides, he also thought it was time for Christina to send a message to her grandfather, who had probably already begun to make moves to rescue her. But at the same time, that also meant her uncle was likely being backed into a corner. Now, Hiro wondered, what would a man like her uncle do next? Elma joked that Chris's uncle might generously admit his guilt and surrender, But since that was completely out of character, the group ultimately guessed that he would probably go all out and become even more determined to hunt Chris down. With that, Mimi went on to say that they should contact Serena now, since she owed Hiro enough to ensure their safety. Speaking of Serena, it seemed like Christina was the only one who didn't know who she was. So the three of them started explaining everything to her. Some of their remarks were pretty sarcastic, but there was no denying that Elma seemed to have gotten their point in some way. However, when Hiro mentioned that Serena was the daughter of a Count Halls, Christina started to remember something. From what she knew, the Halls were a famous family, having produced many military cabinet officials and generals over several generations. After Christina mentioned this, Hiro went on to ask her if nobles would ask the military for help, but before Christina could fully answer his question. Elma cut them off, saying that Christina didn't need to worry about that anymore, since they could just use Hiro's connections for the time being. As it turned out, Elma had been building up some frustration about Serena constantly taking advantage of them, and she thought it would be better if things changed, just for once. Hearing this, Hiro realized that Elma was planning to pin all the blame on Serena if anything went wrong. With that, it was safe to say it was time for them to contact Serena. Before doing so, Hiro informed Miro that their vacation would be ending today, and that they would be leaving the planet. Also, they couldn't really call it a vacation anymore, since they had found a good connection they could use at the right time. Although Miro was sad to hear this news, it couldn't be helped. While Hiro and the girls prepared to leave, Miro assured them that he would handle the departure procedures. But before he forgot, he asked Hiro if he was going to buy May, the maid robot, since Mimi didn't want to leave May behind and Elma thought her specs could bring a lot of peace of mind to the group. In the end, Hiro decided to buy May, even though he knew it was a bit much for him, but having May around would be a huge help. And he also realized that Mimi and Elma both agreed with the decision, which was the only thing that mattered to Hiro. Once the decision was official, their group boarded the ship and began their journey. Meanwhile, aboard the fleet's ship, Serena's assistant seemed increasingly worried, as she appeared to have a bad cold, which Serena found strange since the medical checkup didn't detect anything unusual. Even though she was feeling under the weather, Serena's subordinates reported that they were receiving a signal from a ship leaving Sierra 3, not knowing who it was. Serena was very surprised to see that it was Hiro and his group. When they were allowed to come aboard and speak with Serena, Hiro tried to be as polite as possible, but Serena shot that down, saying there was no need to be so formal. As the meeting began, it was clear there was still tension between the two. Serena started by talking about Hiro's chaotic vacation, and Hiro immediately fired back, saying the military had been a little slow, which made him have to earn a little money from it. On top of that, he informed Serena about their wonderful week-long vacation, which Serena took as bragging. She demanded that he stop right there, or else. But as the conversation started to get more serious, Hiro immediately asked her if she felt something was off about the space pirates, just like he did. Serena thought so too and asked Hiro to explain further. Since he had noted everything on his tablet, he simply showed it to Serena. After skimming through it, Serena found it strange that the space pirates had stealth landing crafts, something that was only used by the military. This made her wonder how Balthazar could have gotten them. Since Hiro also needed someone to cover for him, he decided to negotiate with Serena. She was a little hesitant at first, but when Hiro reminded her that she still owed him, she ended up hiring Hiro as a bodyguard for the supply convoy. That same day, as everyone was getting ready to rest after a long and tiring day, while Hiro was in his room, he heard a knock on his door late at night. He immediately wondered who could be there. When he opened the door, he was surprised to see Christina standing there, seemingly with something to ask. After she sat down, Hiro immediately asked if she was tired. After everything that had happened, Hiro felt that battling gravity like that must have been tough for Christina. However, there was no denying that Christina felt it was all worth it, because for her, being with the three was always full of excitement and a bit of fun. Before Christina could get too excited and energetic about it, Hiro informed her that it wasn't always this intense. He also felt sorry that their vacation had been cut short. As the conversation continued, it seemed Hiro was finally beginning to wonder what was truly important to Christina. Sensing he understood what this was about, Hiro gestured for Christina to sit down next to him on the bed. A little embarrassed, Christina did as Hiro instructed. Although it was hard to say, Christina slowly gathered the courage to ask Hiro if he liked tall, feminine girls with large chests like May. After hearing this question, Hiro realized that he had been right all along. Without hesitation, he told Christina that while he was happy she liked him, he wanted to make it clear that he had no intention of approaching her that way. He was a mercenary, so he couldn't act like that with his client and someone he was supposed to. Besides, I'm also trying to do right by your grandfather, and that's a matter of trust. I'm not saying I don't understand the interests of girls your age, but I feel like you should wait until you're a bit more mature. Hiro went on thinking that Christina didn't need to rush things, but before he could even finish his thought, Christina quickly reacted in a way that took Hiro by surprise. She jumped right into his arms, pinning him down on the bed, and started saying in a sweet voice that she could only be with him like this until her grandfather came to get her. Hearing this, Hiro slowly realized that it might actually be true, because once everything with her uncle was over, Christina would be the sole heir to the Darenwald family. Although Hiro didn't know much about the nobles in this world, he could only assume that Christina would have to marry someone of suitable status arranged by her family. This meant that no matter how old Christina got, a mercenary like him would never stand a chance. Hiro started to wonder whether he should just go along with this. But before he could make a decision, Christina had fallen asleep in his arms. Watching her sleeping so peacefully, Hiro decided that since this was all he could do for now, he would grant his little princess's wish for the short time they had left together. The next morning, when Christina woke up, she immediately became embarrassed when she realized she was holding on to Hiro tightly. The whole room suddenly became tense with Christina's awkwardness. Hiro tried to lighten the mood by saying, "Good morning," to Christina, and she greeted him back. As they stepped out of the room to prepare breakfast, Elma immediately greeted them with a suspicious look, wondering what the two of them had been up to last night. Hiro quickly spoke up, looking worried, saying he could explain everything, but before he could even say a word, it seemed Elma already knew what was going on. She was disappointed that Hiro had broken his promise not to do anything with Christina. Hiro tried to get Christina's help, hoping they could clear things up, but instead of helping, Christina just blushed, thinking about what happened last night, making the misunderstanding even worse. However, contrary to what everyone might think, it turned out that Hiro and Christina had simply slept next to each other last night. Although Elma didn't believe Hiro's words since Christina also agreed with his story, she finally had to accept it. However, she reminded them to be more mindful of their dignity next time, because Christina's actions could affect many people, and she needed to remember that she was of a noble bloodline. Even though the matter had become more serious, Christina seemed quite ashamed of what had happened. Mimi stepped in to de-escalate the tense atmosphere, making sure things didn't go too far. She told Elma that they should just drop it, until both of them had learned their lesson. However, as Mimi spoke up, Elma suddenly realized that she was supposed to have slept with Christina last night, and this made Elma wonder if Mimi had a hand in what happened. Although the discussion didn't end easily, everyone eventually went back to their own tasks. Later that day, after a tense morning, Hiro and his team members began their work. As Hiro sat down in the main pilot's seat, he felt reassured knowing that the Krishna was doing well, and that things were stabilizing after the pirate battle the day before. He was also happy that they were handling the mission Serena gave them well, even if it didn't seem like a very high-profile job. Currently, they were assigned to protect the civilian cargo ship, Pelican 4, a vessel owned by the Halls family, which was also Serena's property. So, if this ship were attacked by pirates, Serena's fleet would be here in 2 or 3 minutes. If pirates attacked, this ship was only defended by a single mercenary vessel, before military ships would arrive to crush them. Basically, it was live bait for space pirates. Hiro was just happy they were applying what he had taught them. It was a pretty easy job unless they caught a fish. But Christina's uncle was also on board, so Elma and Hiro had to take turns on watch duty, as they couldn't risk losing this job right now. While Hiro was working, May brought him something to drink. Seeing how diligent and wonderful May was, Hiro started to feel guilty, because they couldn't upgrade her yet due to their limited budget. However, it seemed May was completely fine with that, and even reassured Hiro that he didn't need to worry about it. To her, the safety of everyone on board was the most important thing, and even if she couldn't fight or perform complex calculations, she was still grateful to be able to serve everyone, especially Hiro, with her current body. Hearing this, Hiro was genuinely amazed, even though May was supposed to be just a robot. She acted, thought, and spoke like a mature human being, so Hiro reminded her that if she had any requests for her upgrade, she could always let him know. If there was anything she wanted to change from his original configuration, they could always figure out a way to make it happen for her. Once everything was settled, Hiro continued to check their surroundings. Based on the readings, it seemed unlikely anything would happen the next day, especially since the pirates in this sector had suffered heavy losses yesterday. According to the intel, about 200 of their ships had been shot down, which meant that Sierra 3's defense systems and Serena's fleet were truly incredible. Once Hiro brought up Serena, May quickly asked when he and an Imperial officer had gotten so close, as she hadn't really expected him to have a relationship with her. Hiro immediately replied that it wasn't really a relationship, but just a joke that fate was playing on him. But it seemed that wasn't the only thing that made May suspicious of Hiro. Besides his connection to Serena, it appeared that neither the ship nor Hiro existed in her database, which made May even more curious about who Hiro really was. Hearing this, Hiro felt a little anxious, but he also couldn't deny that for him, the situation felt quite natural. However, it was probably worse for a mechanical intelligence like May, as he felt he couldn't explain it thoroughly. Hiro wondered whether he should tell May or not, but before he could decide, May reassured him that his secret would be safe with her. Although Hiro still felt that telling her was probably very risky for her to reach her full potential, the information they shared needed to be as accurate as possible. In the end, Hiro decided to explain everything to her, saying that from his perspective, this was all a game he used to play, and to make things more complicated, it wasn't exactly the same. May speculated that all of this might just be a simulation, and they could assume that this universe was a simulation created by a powerful supercomputer. And everyone in this natural phenomenon were virtual images created by someone. Although this theory sounded terrifying, it actually aligned with many things about their current situation. However, for Hiro, an imaginary universe didn't really feel right to him. Not to mention that the level of technology in his world was far inferior to what May described. There weren't any computers like that here, as it was beyond the capabilities of even supercomputers. But if they were really considering a simulation like May said, then perhaps the opposite was true. This is reality, and Hiro's world was an artificial universe created somewhere within this reality. So, if he was given a physical form and jumped out of that world, why would he know nothing about it? However, in any case, they wouldn't know anything unless they found a way to prove that theory. If Hiro was being honest about it, he felt it was a waste of time to have to think about his origins. So he didn't dwell on his past, trying to convince May not to dig any deeper into the matter. It seemed his plan worked because after talking for a while, May quickly respected his decision and didn't continue to probe any further. The next day, it seemed Serena was starting to get bored because it had been 3 days since Hiro and his team took the escort mission, and not a single pirate had come near them. She blamed Hiro for it. Serena didn't even consider the possibility that her warship was the cause, even though the pirate ships could detect its presence. Confidently, Serena went on to say that was impossible because she had changed the ship's ID the day before. However, Elma found it absurd that she could say that so nonchalantly since ships have unique IDs, which means no two ships have the same ID, and they obviously can't be changed that easily. However, instead of accepting the fact that the fault might be theirs, Serena still refused to admit it. It turned out she was simply bored because if there were no pirates to catch, that just meant more people had to work for her. So she was really just stuck in the captain's office all this time. And she was hoping Hiro would at least help her escape this situation so she could get a breather. Hearing this, she seemed like a lonely person. As Serena skimmed through a report on pirate encounter rates throughout the Sierra star system, she found that the incidents had dropped sharply since the large-scale attack, just when they were starting to think the day would pass peacefully. Just like the days before, the transport ship's limited response alarm went off, announcing that the pirates had finally arrived after 3 days. Immediately, everyone started moving to their stations and doing their jobs. With Hiro leading the charge, the team switched the radar mode to short range, and Hiro was put in contact with Pelican 4. Hiro quickly analyzed that the enemy would likely attack right after returning to normal space, so he left the defense systems to Elma. While checking on Pelican 4, Hiro noticed that the other group wasn't aware of the situation regarding the interceptor ship, and they felt it would be quite difficult to escape the enemy with their vessel. For this reason, Hiro quickly reminded them not to resist too strongly and to stop using their hyperdrive, as this would make it easier for him and his team to time their counterattack. So, for now, he asked Pelican 4 to focus on defense as much as possible once they entered normal space. Although Pelican 4 was a civilian vessel, its crew were all Imperial military personnel, so Hiro was confident they could at least save themselves. And even if the ship were destroyed, they could still use their Imperial-issue power armor and heavy weaponry. As Pelican 4 began to decelerate, Mimi suddenly realized there were a total of 11 enemy ships. Among them, one was a battleship and two were cruisers. It seemed like they had something planned, and it wasn't just simple piracy. Hiro wondered if they might have run into a major pirate fleet, but the bigger question was how these guys had managed to detect them. With such a large enemy force, if the team didn't accelerate immediately, they'd be in serious trouble. So, to make the most of this opportunity, Hiro ordered everyone that as soon as they entered normal space, they needed to accelerate as fast as possible. And the crew did exactly as instructed. However, it seemed the pirates weren't showing any mercy this time. Besides being numerous, they were also quick to open fire without warning. But that wasn't the most shocking part. Upon looking closer at the ships, they were stunned to discover they were old models from the Imperial military. At this point, it was easy to conclude that the Imperial military was actually quite lax in managing its equipment, and the enemy wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. This made it clear that these attackers weren't just space pirates, but that this was Balthazar's doing, and his target was Christina. Before they could even realize what was happening, the enemy battleship's main cannon began firing at them. And Hiro was aware that not even the Krishna shield would hold against it, as they were facing an Imperial fleet. Elma excitedly asked Hiro what their plan was now. It seemed Hiro was very excited, and decided to attack without hesitation. Amidst the fierce barrage, everyone on the ship began to brace for a possible impact. While everyone else was worried for their lives, Hiro was completely focused, thinking that keeping their distance from a large enemy was a rather absurd idea because to Hiro, the farther away they were, the more vulnerable they were to the enemy's powerful laser beams. Although the Krishna shield was strong, it couldn't block those large caliber lasers forever. So first they needed to get closer to prevent the enemy battleship from using its main cannon, and then Hiro planned to bombard the enemy ship with anti-battleship reaction torpedoes. After some maneuvering, they finally latched onto the enemy battleship's blind spot, just as planned. However, instead of attacking right away, Hiro decided to wait a bit, because this warship wasn't the only enemy they had to deal with. Even though the opponent was a large warship, they still needed to consider the cannons of the other ships. If they focused only on the warship's blind spot, the other ships wouldn't be able to fire their main cannons, and the enemy's escort fleet couldn't fire either for fear of hitting their own ship. Hiro planned to use his own ship's hull as a hostage, because fighting a fleet of warships is extremely difficult. They needed to think outside the box as much as possible. As the smaller ships began to move around them, just as predicted, Hiro proceeded to the next step. For Krishna and Hiro, this type of enemy was easier to deal with, and to make the situation even more dramatic, it seemed the enemy ships were sharing the same frequency as the Krishna. This meant they were just ordinary Imperial soldiers. This implied that not only was their equipment management lax, but they were indeed Imperial soldiers. There were many possible explanations for why this was happening. One of them was that Christina's grandfather might have bribed them, and now Serena's fleet had entered the fray. Using the communication frequency, Serena warned the engaged Imperial warships that their actions were suspected of being in serious violation of military law. Therefore, if they did not cease and desist and shut down their engines, they would be punished mercilessly under the law. However, despite that warning, it seemed none of the ships showed any sign of stopping or obeying Serena's command. So, Serena once again reminded them all that their actions were in serious violation of Imperial and military law, and if they refused to comply, Serena's fleet would be forced to shoot them down. But despite Serena's repeated warnings, the enemy seemed uninterested in the transport ship. It was clear their real target was Christina. Although Christina didn't know what methods her uncle had used to get them to join this battle, it was clear they couldn't back down. The enemy was even willing to damage their own ships, and had all weapons active, proving they had no hesitation about friendly fire. When heat signatures were detected, including from cruisers and destroyers, the battle grew even more intense. Serena ordered her fleet to designate the enemy as a rogue fleet, and requested that Hiro leave the area immediately. As they began to retreat, the enemy attacked them with a laser beam, but fortunately the Krishna was able to evade it expertly. As the ship's captain, Hiro tried to remain calm and reassure the crew, hoping to prevent any panic, even though the situation was spiraling out of control. Still, Hiro continued to assure everyone that everything was fine, and that it was all going according to plan. Meanwhile, Serena's attack grew more intense, and they needed to get out of the area before taking a direct hit. Luckily, they managed to escape in time. According to Elma's analysis, only one enemy ship was still fully operational, But was it okay for them to just hide? Hiro quickly said there was no need to put themselves in danger in this situation. Serena was here so she could handle it herself. But would this battle ever end, and who would be the victor? As the enemy ship began to comply, the Vestor's engines slowly shut down. The ship's first mate, Lieutenant Roman Kestrel, also contacted Serena directly. Since he was the first mate, Serena wondered what had happened to their captain. According to Lieutenant Roman, their captain had harmed himself, and he had subsequently taken command. After hearing this, Serena announced that they would begin rescuing survivors, so the ship needed to prepare to receive them. Meanwhile, it seemed Hiro and his group found this information rather suspicious. However, since the situation had calmed down, the group concluded that the battle was probably over. So once things stabilized on Serena's end, they would return to Pelican 4. Mimi then checked on Christina, who was now quite calm compared to before. However, she honestly admitted that she had been very worried earlier. Hiro hoped that this was true. When the battle finally came to an end, Hiro and the others took the rebel team to the Sierra Prime colony. The independent anti-space pirate squad had paperwork and resupplying to do, so they were released from their duties. As for the reward, since there were no space pirates, Hiro and his group didn't get much, but they still managed to bring home around 240,000 Enel for 3 days of work, and that was it. Besides that, they also realized that Christina's grandfather might contact them at any time, so they decided to stay in the Sierra Prime colony. Hiro thought this might be a good time to upgrade May. For that reason, Hiro and May were on their way to the Orient Industry Branch office. As soon as they arrived, Hiro started to feel unusually anxious. Based on the story he'd heard from Miro about the origin of mechanical intelligence, androids might consider this their birthplace, making this place a homeland for robots like May. However, the more he looked at everyone, the more intimidating this place seemed. Seeing Hiro's worried expression, May immediately asked if he was okay. Instantly, Hiro reassured her that there was nothing to worry about, keeping his thoughts to himself. After walking for a while, they reached the end of the area, where a large building greeted them. It turned out this was Orient Industry, the largest manufacturer in the Sierra Star system, and the two of them were about to enter the building. A girl greeted them warmly. Even at the reception desk, the receptionist was an android. What surprised Hiro was that the receptionist seemed to already know why they were here. Possibly because May had transmitted the data for their request while she was being checked in for the upgrade. Hiro waited in the reception area, but before he did, he asked the receptionist how long this upgrade would take. According to her, in May's case, it wasn't really an upgrade, but rather a body transfer process, so it wouldn't take too long. A body transfer is when the studio performs partial maintenance, like changing muscle fibers or repairing worn joints. This type of light maintenance helps upgrade the bodies currently in use. However, in this case, they would be replacing everything, from the skeletal structure to the muscle fibers and even the central microprocessors. For cases like that, it's easier to just transfer the data to a new body. So it's basically like upgrading a computer, and it would take about 2 hours at most. While May was undergoing the transfer, the receptionist kept Hiro occupied and offered some advice on how to live with robots like May, as well as things to remember when maintaining such robots. And before he knew it, his Enel had taken a serious hit without him even realizing. Finally, May was done, and although she didn't look any different on the outside, the receptionist assured him that May had become much stronger internally and was now more powerful. She was stronger than the average combat robot, and on top of that, it seemed May had been equipped with some items that could be used in combat, including a grenade-like object and a rather powerful security baton. However, besides these things, it seemed that as per the customization request, Hiro needed to conduct the operational test with May himself. This meant they had to do something rather unexpected. After the test, Hiro felt a bit embarrassed, but he couldn't deny that the experience with May was so impressive that he couldn't describe the feeling. Even so, since this wasn't Hiro's goal when he bought May, he felt as if he had paid to free May from slavery just so he could do whatever he wanted with her, which made him feel even more guilty. On top of that, he had also brought May to meet Mimi and Elma, which made his heart feel even heavier. To make matters worse, when they returned to the Krishna, an unfortunate incident was waiting for Hiro. It turned out some soldiers had come aboard the ship and were forcibly escorting Hiro into their vehicle, leaving him completely confused about what was happening. Hiro tried to explain everything to the soldiers, and while they were waiting for confirmation, May began to wonder who these soldiers were. Using her internal systems, May immediately discovered that these men were soldiers of Count Darenwald. They had been sent here to protect Christina. Actually, the Count had already contacted the group, but Hiro hadn't received the message because it arrived while May was being modified. When Hiro checked the message, it seemed May was right. After a while, once they received confirmation, the last of the soldiers finally allowed them to pass. Since Elma knew about the message and chose not to deliver it, Hiro guessed that she might have known he and May were doing something a little steamy. Although he didn't think this could be resolved with just a few words, Hiro decided to just let things be and not apologize to Elma. At least that's what he planned to do, but as soon as he entered the room and saw Elma waiting patiently for them in the kitchen, Hiro immediately got down on his knees and apologized to her for his incompetence. Even May apologized and asked Elma if she was really not angry about what had happened between her and Hiro. Elma immediately reassured her that she had no problem with May at all, but she still wanted Hiro to reflect a little on what had happened. As the tension gradually dissipated, Hiro suddenly noticed Christina and Mimi looking sad, hugging each other. He began to wonder what had happened to the two of them. Elma quickly explained that since they were now receiving communications from the Count, it meant that Christina would soon be returning to him. With the two of them having shared a room and been together for so long, Elma said that it would be very difficult for them to part ways. Elma also mentioned that the Count had informed them he wanted to see Christina as soon as possible, and hoped she would be kept safe. The message was sent through the guild, and the clerk had already confirmed Christina's safety, so everything should be fine. However, since Hiro was always the one in charge, the final decision was still his to make. With that information, the group immediately got to work, preparing to set off for the meeting. Hiro and his group were asked to travel in an armored vehicle, which was perfectly reasonable to ensure Christina's safety. However, they didn't expect the Count to ask them to come along, as they really thought he would just send someone else to get her. Elma then suggested that perhaps the Count didn't want their first meeting to be just through a message. Whatever the reason may be, Christina just hoped this wasn't a trap from her uncle. While they were talking, they finally arrived at the base where Christina's grandfather's ship was waiting. Looking at the enormous size and power of the ship, Hiro concluded that Christina's grandfather was definitely a Count, which also meant he would be very cautious with outsiders. As soon as they landed, a long line of maids and a butler greeted them warmly, overjoyed at the return of their master's granddaughter. The butler immediately said he would take Christina to see her grandfather, while Hiro and his group were to wait in the reception room. Although he was very worried about letting Christina go alone, Hiro hesitated a bit, but when Christina gave him a reassuring look, Hiro finally let the butler take her away. While his group continued to wait in the reception room, Mimi looked around, quite surprised and impressed to see that the inside of the ship didn't look like a ship at all. It felt like a 5-star hotel or a mansion, with a holographic garden they could look out on while enjoying their tea. Elma went on to explain that this was a warship from the Count's private fleet, but it was understandable that it also served as a vacation home and guest house, which was probably why there were so many maids and butlers here. Thinking about this made Hiro wonder if it was possible to turn the Krishna into a place like this. However, before he could even start thinking about doing something like that, Elma spoke up, saying it wasn't necessary, since the Krishna was already perfectly livable. From the automated cooking equipment to the systems the ship possessed, the Krishna was certainly a vessel that could rival high-class places like this one. Besides, they had a maid droid, so there was no need to upgrade it into such a lavish place. Realizing that Elma had a good point, Hiro dismissed his initial thought. However, if they considered the ship as a living space, a larger ship would be more comfortable to live in than the Krishna. Of course, it wouldn't be cheap, but it was still much cheaper than buying high-class citizenship in the Empire, as well as buying land and building a house on a planet. Moreover, it would increase his mobility and also open up more opportunities to earn money from jobs. That's why Hiro was considering buying a mothership. Besides that, the Krishna had been starting to feel cramped lately. It wasn't that he planned to add more people to the team, but having a larger ship would make more sense at this point in time. After a short conversation, a maid entered the room, announcing that Count Abraham Darenwald was on his way to meet the group. Immediately, Hiro and his crew showed their respect. Even though the Count might have already known who Hiro was, he still introduced himself as the captain from the mercenary guild. He then informed the Count that he wasn't accustomed to proper etiquette and asked to be excused for any surprising lapses in his manners. The Count went on to assure Hiro that he didn't need to be so formal. His very presence made Hiro tremble. His dignified demeanor seemed to assert his noble status. After being invited to sit, Hiro and his group felt more at ease. To their surprise, the Count immediately thanked them. for doing a wonderful job protecting and ensuring Christina's safety. As the head of the Darenwald family and Christina's grandfather, he expressed his personal gratitude. Hiro, with his straightforward personality, didn't hesitate to say that the job was anything but easy. The Count was curious to know what had happened, and although Elma thought this was disrespectful to the Count, Hiro went on to recount everything his group had been through to get here, from unexpected adventures to battles with space pirates. Since Hiro's story didn't contradict what Christina had said, the Count promised to give the group a fitting reward, including covering all necessary expenses. This promise made Hiro very happy. He had spent a lot of money on this. Now that Christina was with them, Elma asked Count Darenwald what he planned to do next. After careful consideration, he wanted Hiro and his crew to continue the protection detail. Although he had bought all the combat power he could muster, their opponent was a fleet from the regular army, something he didn't take lightly. Besides, he saw no reason why mercenaries would refuse when there was a handsome reward. Without hesitation, Hiro immediately seized the opportunity and declared that they would take the job no matter what. After the short meeting, as they returned to the ship, Hiro couldn't help but feel excited about what was to come. Since he had spent quite a lot of Enel at that resort, Count Darenwald's offer to fully reimburse him made him even happier. On top of that, receiving an 8 million Enel reward for protecting Christina made him ecstatic. After deducting all the expenses, he had about 24.4 million left. Buying a mothership no longer seemed so far-fetched. In addition, they would also be receiving about 250,000 Enel per day for the next escort mission. However, this reward amount seemed rather suspicious, as the daily rate was usually only around 80,000. Elma explained that this sum included hush money, because this incident was a scandal that could bring down the Darenwald family. The Count was essentially asking Hiro not to reveal anything about it. As he thought about this, Hiro suddenly realized he had already told Serena about the incident. He also wondered about the Imperial Army's involvement, since deserters would also be a huge scandal. Elma went on to explain that they were actually being played by both the Count and the army, as both sides wanted to settle this between themselves. If this news were to get out, Hiro could end up being an enemy to not just the Count, but the Imperial Army as well. So he had no choice but to keep his mouth shut. When they finally returned to the Krishna, Hiro and the girls went to rest. After changing and relaxing for a bit, Hiro suddenly felt bored. Mimi and Elma went shopping. They'd been on the Krishna for a while and needed a break. Things were also safer around them thanks to the Count, but May still went with them just in case. This left Hiro on the Krishna with nothing to do, and for some reason he felt like he couldn't function properly without the girls. While he was lost in thought, the doorbell suddenly rang. Hiro wondered who would be visiting the Krishna unannounced. He checked the security camera, and to his surprise, it was none other than Serena. It seemed Serena was on vacation and feeling bored, so she decided to pay them a visit. Since Hiro didn't want to deal with her, he tried to tell her to go rest with her subordinates, even calling her a loner. But before Hiro could realize it, Serena started to cry, and in the end, Hiro finally decided to let Serena in. Seeing her act like that made Hiro feel bad for turning her away earlier. Since he was feeling bored anyway, he decided to spend some time with her, seeing as there was nothing else to do. However, he thought it wasn't right for the officer to come aboard the ship just for him, so Hiro decided to take her out for a walk around the Empire. Once they were outside, Hiro suggested they take a stroll down the colony's main street. Since Serena wasn't familiar with the term stroll, Hiro explained that it simply meant walking around without a specific purpose, looking for something interesting. Since this was an area with many tourist attractions, they were sure to find something fun for Serena. After wandering around for a while, they decided to go into a VR station, which also got Hiro pretty excited. Originally, VR stations were designed to serve people who were waiting to go down to resort planets, or those who couldn't go for some reason. They could use the VR devices to at least feel like they were enjoying a vacation. But nowadays, because so many people are interested in advanced VR, the VR industry has become a major tourist attraction itself. However, Serena felt that this might not be a good idea for them. Hiro was confused and didn't understand what Serena meant. He tried to ask her what she was getting at, and Serena replied that going outside only to lock yourself up in a VR space was ridiculous. Hiro realized that she didn't like VR at all. Instead, Serena suggested they visit a restaurant. She explained that the Sierra Star system was a top-tier, galaxy-scale resort, with delicious food and drinks from all over the galaxy, even from outside the Empire. The place was highly rated, especially for its drinks, meaning anyone could enjoy a wide variety of beverages. However, Hiro wasn't keen on the idea, afraid that Serena would get completely drunk. As they started arguing in public, a group of rather suspicious-looking men approached them. They stared at Serena, leering at her in an unwelcome way. The men said they might have just hit the jackpot, implying they had bad intentions and would probably try to take advantage of her in ways Hiro found hard to imagine. Model. Especially knowing that Serena was no ordinary woman. Hiro warned the two men that he wouldn't recommend they lay a hand on her, and as a result, this angered the two thugs so much that one of them suddenly lunged at Hiro. Since this guy was tugging at his own clothes, even though Hiro wasn't the best at communicating, he couldn't just stand there and not teach them a lesson. However, before he could act, Serena made the first move. Upon seeing Serena's sword, both men panicked. And I didn't even have to do much. They just ran off like cowards. Once they realized Serena was a noble, they scrambled away in fear. It seems the commoners in this world are truly terrified of the aristocracy, which is a sad state of affairs. But let's put that aside for now, model, because other, more dangerous people might approach them. In the end, both Hiro and Serena decided to head to a restaurant. As they were having dinner, Serena couldn't hide her delight. She was so happy because the food was absolutely delicious, while Hiro, meanwhile, sent a distress signal to Mimi and Elma just in case. It seemed he couldn't handle Serena on his own if she got too drunk. Although he tried to be discreet, Serena still noticed. Hiro immediately explained that he did it to ensure they were both safe. Because of this, Serena told him she'd thought he was always being cold to her, as if he were putting up a wall between them. She suggested it would be nice if Hiro could open up to her more. Without hesitation, Hiro replied that he felt it would only be a nuisance. He explained that as a lieutenant in the Imperial Fleet and the daughter of a duke, Serena needed to keep her distance from him. Moreover, Hiro felt she didn't need to concern herself with him, since she could surely find a fiancé, someone worthy of a person like her, a duke's daughter. Despite hearing this from Hiro, Serena felt a little sad, but she eventually accepted that this was his true intention. Serena was just worried she would end up living alone when she got older. To comfort her a little, Hiro reassured her that wouldn't happen to someone of noble lineage. He was sure that other nobles had probably introduced her to potential candidates. Even so, Serena felt she hadn't met anyone who truly fit what she wanted in a partner. The last person she met was so spoiled he'd never even held a sword, let alone a gun. There was another who she found too weak, unable to beat her in a sword fight despite being very muscular. There were even some who were skilled swordsmen but had terrible personalities, willing to cut down commoners as if it were nothing. Based on Serena's laments, Hiro concluded that while these men might not be ideal, they definitely weren't to her taste. But even he himself wasn't the type of man she was looking for. Although he could use a gun, swords were a different story. However, Serena had to admit that she was quite surprised Hiro knew how to use a sword, since he wasn't a noble. On top of that, Serena had also fallen for Hiro's bravery and courage. He had slashed through a horde of strange creatures in a suit of combat armor, developed a new strategy, flew into a Federation fleet all by himself, and showed the talent and skill to pull everything off perfectly, even though he was an outsider. He had reorganized the independent anti-piracy fleet and had a great tactical eye for building an effective battle plan against the pirates. Because of all this, Serena felt that these qualities of Hiro's far outweighed his swordsmanship. Hearing all of this, Hiro almost wanted to puke, as he didn't really expect Serena to think so highly of him. However, since he wanted to be completely blunt with her, Hiro immediately said that he didn't think this would work out at all. Even if they loved each other, Serena was a noble and he was just a commoner, a fact he was well aware of. Serena suggested that this wouldn't be a big problem, because Hiro could get promoted to at least platinum rank and everything would be fine. If he could achieve the gold star, it would be even better. This was the first time Hiro had ever heard of the gold star. Serena went on to explain that the gold star was the common name for the first-class Star Cross medal. Only those who achieved outstanding military accomplishments for the Empire were awarded it. In fact, it was the highest honor a soldier could receive. It was a limited award, but its recipients were treated as an equal to a marquis and given a corresponding position. She felt that Hiro could somehow earn this medal. However, it seemed to Hiro that even if he could win the gold star, dating Serena was another matter entirely. This obviously made Serena even angrier. The lesson here, though, is that you can't force someone to love you. After the forced date between Hiro and Serena, they both finally returned home and started working on their own tasks on the way to their next mission. Mimi reported to Hiro that the fleet had received permission to depart. And since they were the escort, they needed to ensure all their movements were synchronized and not break formation at any time. She also reported that it had been 3 days since they handed Christina over to the Count, and they were finally about to leave Sierra Prime. Hiro had to endure the incident with the intruder, but now everything was ready for the journey, including setting up the maintenance bay for May. It seems Hiro and his crew were doing a pretty good job, as they were hired for another task. Now they had to escort the fleet carrying the Count and Christina. Still, most of the fleet was armed on par with the military, so it was likely that Krishna wouldn't have much to do. Their destination was the capital star system, called Duxer. Hiro anticipated that the journey there would be very long, so they would have to use a few FTL ships and warp gates. All Hiro hoped for was that no one would attack, so he could make a clear profit from this job, since 250,000 NL per day was an incredible amount of money. Elma, on the other hand, had a feeling that the Count was doing this to show off, but there was no denying that if news leaked of a high-ranking noble hiring a mid-tier gold-ranked crew at the normal market rate, it would certainly attract major attention. People would start saying the house was on the decline. As someone who knew a lot about these things, Elma was sure that it wasn't just nobles who did this, but merchants as well. Usually, merchants would pay 1.5 times the market price, while nobles paid double. This was called the trend. Mimi was shocked to hear this, as she never expected this was how rich people spent their money. The amount was so large that it didn't feel real to her anymore. However, Elma felt that what Mimi said was silly, since she also earned a lot of money from a normal person's perspective. Feeling embarrassed by what Elma just said, the awkward atmosphere was broken when May announced that they had received a synchronization request. Immediately, Mimi set up synchronization mode with the Count's fleet and the FTL and hyperdrive systems. After that, Hiro started to relax a little, thinking they could finally leave the rest of the work to the fleet. In the midst of this, they encountered a warp gate that was larger than usual. Hiro finally concluded that they were truly very different from what he had seen in the game, both in size and shape. In truth, this wasn't the first difference he'd noticed between this world and Seoul, but it was a really big one. This made him start to find it difficult to estimate distances in space. Just comparing it to a single colony was enough to see how massive it was. The docked Imperial ships looked like grains of rice, and right in the middle was the actual warp gate, which warped time and space to connect across the cosmos. It was said to be a combination of the best technologies the Empire had to offer. However, Hiro didn't understand how it worked, but he figured that no matter how they explained it, he wouldn't be able to understand. So, for now, he just had to let it go. On the other hand, Mimi realized that the enemy hadn't attacked them on the way to the gate, which made her wonder if they were waiting to ambush them on the other side. Considering this possibility, Hiro thought that an attack on the other side was quite possible in this situation, but he doubted they would attack near the warp gate's exit. Mimi was confused, and Elma explained that a warp gate can move ships across thousands or even tens of thousands of light years, making it one of the most important facilities in the entire Empire. In short, if someone were to destroy or capture it, it would cause unimaginable damage to the Empire, not just in terms of logistics, but also in its strategic position. That meant the defense force here had to be on a completely different level. Therefore, they would need an immense amount of firepower to be able to fight off an enemy. Even the Krishna would be turned to ash in a second. This meant that when they passed through the warp gate, the path ahead would be very dangerous. The Nipuk and Melkit star systems are both under the Empire's direct control. Kumat and their destination, Duxer, are territory of the Count's family, which means the big problems will come from Ziegel and Wellick. If the Count has a good relationship with the nobles there, they might provide him with an escort. However, even if they were to officially ask the Count, he certainly wouldn't easily disclose private matters between nobles. With this, Hiro asked for May's opinion on the matter. According to her, she thought the most likely time for an attack would be after they exit the Kumat star system. Obviously, Count de Reinwald's defeat would be a huge blow to the Lord, but it was also the homeland of his son, Balthazar. Based on what had happened before, May could guess that although his specific course of action was still unclear, she believed Balthazar was skilled at manipulating others. With this, there was a high probability that he would gather his forces in Count Darenwald's territory, where he could easily exert his authority. Therefore, the chances of them waiting to ambush the team after they passed through the Kumat star system via hyperspace were very high. At the very least, May had come to the conclusion that this was highly likely since they had, after all, attacked their squad with forces beyond their expectations. She was also certain that Balthazar was pulling every trick in the book to put their team in a difficult position. After hearing this, Hiro asked Elma for her opinion on whether they should inform the Count. After a moment of thought, Elma wasn't so sure, as this was tantamount to accusing a territory of disloyalty, which Hiro felt was somewhat reasonable, especially since the Count's son had already betrayed him. Even so, to Elma, he was still a nobleman, and with such a high position, he certainly wouldn't want his honor tarnished by mere outsiders. This, in turn, gave Hiro more to think about. But for now, Hiro and the girls decided to relax and enjoy the time they had left while they still could, by playing an online game. Mimi reassured Christina, who was currently on the mothership, that there was no need to worry about any attacks, as Hiro would handle everything. However, being the blunt one, Elma shattered their hopes by saying that Hiro wasn't invincible either. Despite knowing that, Mimi always trusted in Hiro's abilities no matter what. With that, they were currently relaxing, traveling through a hyperspace lane, on autopilot, so unless they were attacked, the team had nothing to do. And what better way to kill time than by playing mahjong? As for why mahjong even existed in this world, that surprised even Hiro. While Christina was on the Count's ship, May and Hiro stayed in the cockpit, just in case someone launched a surprise attack. To kill time, they decided to play a few rounds of an online game. This was Mimi's first time playing this game, and the other girls couldn't believe how good she was. Especially since Mimi was in the lead, while Elma was at the bottom of the scoreboard. This made Elma quite frustrated. Right now, Hiro couldn't deny that Mimi's strategy was truly bizarre, but somehow her risky plays worked out, and she even managed to draw a thin sumo. Meanwhile, Elma's strategy was quite solid. However, Elma kept getting bad tiles, causing her to lose continuously. The sight of the two of them facing off was like a battle between great luck and terrible misfortune, and it was clearly amusing Hiro a great deal. Besides that, despite passing through the space gates, they weren't attacked at either Ziegel or Wellick. Now, as they prepared to warp out of the Kumat star system, it seemed May's prediction was correct. The enemy would attack right after they left. According to Mimi, since the Count already knew about the whole scheme, they felt like they had nowhere else to go, no matter how hard they tried. It's precisely because there is no way back. May further explained that Balthazar was desperate, because in his current situation he couldn't escape his own destruction. But with the ambition he had shown, it was unlikely he would flee or seek asylum. That's why from his point of view, if the Count and Lady Christina were dead, he could use force to seize the headship of the family because that was the only option he had left. He was surely planning to sort everything out after inheriting the title. So if the enemy did attack, they had to be ready to face whatever they threw at them. Because now there was no turning back. The only plan Hiro had now was to keep himself and his team flexible and adapt to the situation. To be blunt, this meant they had no concrete plan at all. The moment they warped out of hyperspace, Hiro immediately noticed that every ship in the fleet was on high alert, which meant they were surrounded by the enemy. However, these unidentified ships looked just like ordinary warships. Although the fleet tried to contact them through wide-area communication channels, they got no response. On top of that, these ships were just circling around without attacking. This strongly suggested that the enemy was just trying to hold them in this area, waiting for something to happen. Just seconds later, Mimi's radar detected something approaching their position at extreme speed from outside the radar's range. Based on its trajectory, it seemed the target was heading straight for the Count's ship. This was probably why the enemy was trying to stall for time. Without hesitation, Hiro and his team immediately activated their engines at full power and accelerated. When the target appeared on the screen, the whole team was stunned to see its rather strange shape. Long and slender. Even Hiro, who had spent a lot of time in Seoul, had never seen a ship like it. However, Hiro believed that Krishna's lasers could take care of this target. But as they began to open fire, it seemed the enemy ship's shields were too strong. Despite their best efforts to inflict damage, it was all in vain. Meanwhile, the target continued to accelerate. Even with Krishna moving at maximum speed, they couldn't keep up with it. It seemed they still couldn't catch the strange ship. What was worse was that the strange ship had pierced straight through the Count's vessel. Hiro immediately requested a report as he checked the parameters on his screen. But strangely enough, there were no changes in thermal energy or phase, even after the ship collided, making Hiro wonder, does this mean it's not self-destructing? Meanwhile, Elma ran some more checks and noticed the other ships seemed to be just holding their positions, not taking any aggressive action. This confused Hiro even more. What is that ship actually trying to do? According to Mei's assessment, it was most likely a suppression ship. This type of ship is designed to pierce a target's hull with a collision horn. After ramming, it uses conduits to flood the target with soldiers and take control from the inside. These ships are equipped with extremely powerful shields, high-output propulsion systems, and saturated shield protectors. However, they aren't equipped with any weapons, with all their power focused on infiltration and suppression. Still, no matter how Mei explained it, it seemed Hiro couldn't quite grasp the full situation. Until now, he'd always thought Balthazar simply wanted to kill the Count and Christina. If that's the case, Hiro wondered, why go to all the trouble of infiltrating their ship? Just planting a reaction bomb would get the job done. But as Elma thought it over, she realized it wasn't entirely out of the question. The nobles of the Empire place great importance on swordsmanship. This could mean Balthazar himself is on that ship. And as an imperial noble, he wants to settle this with a sword. Now, things were starting to make a bit more sense. Even so, Hiro still couldn't understand the values and perspectives of the nobles in this world. But looking at the bigger picture, if Balthazar didn't settle things with a sword, it could damage the unity of the forces backing him. With all that considered, Hiro wondered, so what should we do about this strange ship now? According to Mei, since the ship was directly connected to the Count's vessel, there were numerous dangers to consider, including the possibility of an explosion. This led to only one option. They had to storm the ship and face the enemy in close-quarters combat. Although Mei admitted it was an extremely risky move, it seemed they had no other choice. Hiro couldn't just sit back and do nothing while the Count and the others were fighting for their lives. Besides, if the Count mistook him for an enemy and shot him, that would just increase his reward. But more important than anything, he had to save Christina from danger at all costs. With that in mind, Elma and Mimi were tasked with staying with the Krishna while Hiro took Mei with him. As soon as they set foot on the Count's ship, Hiro was taken aback by how quiet it was. So much so that it didn't feel like they were in the middle of a battle at all. But even so, they had to move carefully to avoid drawing any attention that could lead to the enemy discovering them. However, it seemed that moving stealthily was going to be quite a challenge, especially with the upgraded Mei. While her ability to wield power armor weaponry was impressive, it drew far too much attention. From a physics standpoint, it seemed impossible, but it must have been some kind of mysterious technology. So, Hiro tried not to dwell on it for the time being. Additionally, his own power armor was designed with heavy plating and strong firepower, so he hoped he could handle any standard close-quarters fights without Mei's support. However, before he left, Elma had reminded him to always be on his guard and avoid getting hit by a noble's sword, because otherwise he'd be cut down, as his armor was like tofu against a noble's blade. On top of that, a noble's sword could even deflect laser beams, so Hiro needed to be especially careful not to get hit by a ricochet. On the way to the main hall, Hiro asked Mei whether this type of ramming tactic ship was common in this world. According to Mei, that didn't seem to be the case. Some amateurs had built this type of vessel through connections, but not many were made and they were rarely used. The success rate for these ships was also very low. In the military, this type of ship was commonly known as an expensive coffin, and yet Balthazar had successfully pulled off this tactic. And if it weren't for Hiro, someone like him would have likely gotten away with as many schemes. That's why on this mission, Hiro needed to maintain maximum focus, because this would be his only chance to ensure everyone's safety no matter what. As they ventured deeper into the ship, Mimi reported that there was a firefight happening in the room to their left. The moment they stepped inside, Hiro was surprised to see the ship's crew, dressed as maids and butlers, a truly surreal sight for him. Even so, it didn't seem to be an unfamiliar sight for Mei. Now that they were here, the appearance of Hiro's power armor stunned the enemy, as they never expected someone to be equipped like that on the ship. However, as the situation could get bloodier from here, Hiro ordered the team to fall back, leaving him and Mei to handle the enemies themselves. As the battle began, though the enemies fired relentlessly, their primitive handheld weapons were completely unable to damage Hiro's modern power armor. Thanks to the armor's overwhelming power and defense, Hiro and Mei could have simply pushed forward if they wanted to. However, to their surprise, The enemy also possessed power armor. It appeared to be a medium-class model designed for military purposes. This made Hiro realize that the enemy had prioritized agility, perhaps to deal with fast-moving targets. However, in such a confined space, the enemy armor's mobility offered almost no advantage. Hiro's strength and defensive capabilities played a crucial role in gaining the upper hand in the fight. On top of that, Mei's precise marksmanship provided significant support, allowing them to easily push back the enemy. With just a little more effort, they could overcome all the foes in no time. As the two of them continued to fight their way from one enemy to the next, they quickly cleared out those in their way and advanced to the next room. At this point, Mimi informed them that the remaining enemies were concentrated in the large hall at the end of the corridor. Knowing that time was of the essence, Hiro had Mei go on ahead. He was surprised to find she was even faster than he'd expected. When the two of them finally reached the main hall, Hiro was stunned by the scene before him. Hiro witnessed a horrifying sight. It seemed many people had been killed in the battle, but not by laser weapons or explosions, but by the slashes of a sword. In that moment, Hiro began to wonder if this was truly the power of a noble's sword. The sight sent a chill down his spine, even while protected by his powerful armor. As Hiro scanned the area, he found a room where Christina and the others were. From the looks of it, Christina seemed to be all right, but the Count had suffered multiple injuries. Fortunately, his wounds didn't appear to be life-threatening. As he continued to observe, Hiro's gaze fell upon a man standing there with two swords in hand. There was no mistaking it. That was Balthazar de Reinwald. Immediately, Mei charged in to engage him. Hiro was completely taken aback by Balthazar's ability to effortlessly deflect the laser beams with just his sword. Although Balthazar's physical abilities had been enhanced with cybernetics, Hiro never expected him to be this strong. The fact that Balthazar could go head-to-head with Mei, even after she had been fully optimized, proved he was a far greater foe than Hiro had anticipated. However, that didn't mean they were going to give up. Even though his physical abilities were overwhelmingly enhanced, Hiro was quite certain he wouldn't be able to dodge Balthazar's next attack. However, he was mistaken to think so. As he prepared to fire a laser at Balthazar, the man easily sliced Hiro's laser gun in two. As the battle grew more intense, Hiro ordered Mei to switch her launcher to focus mode, determined to defeat Balthazar no matter what. He reasoned that if it was a mobile weapon, its battery capacity surely couldn't be that large. So their only option was to unleash a barrage of powerful lasers to destroy his shield. When they started firing with all their might, smoke began to cover the combat area. Hiro wondered if Balthazar was activating his self-destruct mode. However, according to Mei, this was just a smokescreen tactic to reduce the laser's effectiveness, meaning Balthazar just wanted to hide. So, instead of continuing to fire the laser, Hiro decided to throw the entire laser gun at Balthazar. And surprisingly, this plan worked. Balthazar stumbled and fell to the ground from Hiro's unexpected attack. As Hiro checked to see if Balthazar was down, he hoped this would be an opportunity for his opponent to stop. However, to everyone's surprise, Balthazar wasn't defeated at all. He was just faking it and immediately gripped his sword, ready to fight again. The whole group was worried for Hiro. The question was, could Hiro avoid this attack? Or would this be the end of his glorious life? In reality, not even a noble's sword like Balthazar's could penetrate Hiro's shield. In fact, Hiro's shield was so strong that he easily defeated Balthazar in an instant. However, Hiro couldn't deny that he'd thought for a moment that Balthazar's sword might actually cut through his shield. But thankfully, it didn't happen. After Balthazar was defeated, Hiro asked Count Derenwald what should be done with the man. The Count ordered his men to arrest Balthazar immediately, to prevent him from causing any more harm. In addition, the Count also offered Balthazar's sword to Hiro, since he was the one who defeated him. Although Hiro had no intention of accepting it, the Count kept insisting that Hiro should take it, since he had helped the Count solve the problem with his son. In the end, Hiro accepted the sword as the Count requested. With the leader of this force captured and all enemies aboard the ship apprehended, the surrounding warships had either been shot down or had surrendered. This attack had truly caused a great deal of damage, both to the assets and the lives of the Count's fleet. Therefore, the fleet needed repairs and supplies and would be stopping at a colony in the Kumat star system. Meanwhile, Hiro and his team would continue their guard duty, but in reality, the Krishna would be docked in the hangar of the Count's flagship. As for the crew, they were on standby, which meant they could do whatever they wanted. Because after a long, stressful day, they desperately needed some rest. Hiro was planning his well-deserved rest until Christina visited him with a sweet smile. She greeted him with a "good evening," The moment he recognized her, Hiro immediately said he didn't think she'd be able to get away, considering how busy the fleet was. As they began to chat comfortably, Hiro shared his thoughts about Christina's grandfather. It seemed that this whole time, he felt that the Count was always scowling, as if he disliked Hiro interfering in his confrontation. Christina was fully aware that her grandfather always seemed displeased, but she also assured Hiro that the Count was actually very fond of him, and with her standing right there, he had no reason to doubt it. Hiro took this opportunity to give Christina one of her most precious possessions. Now that Balthazar has been captured, Hiro assured her that she would no longer be targeted, and that also meant his duty as her knight protector was over. Hearing this, Christina felt sad and anxious that she would never see Hiro again. Without hesitation, she confessed her feelings to Hiro, a love that was more than just friendship. As it turned out, Hiro had been aware of this for a long time. No matter the situation, he knew that to Christina, he was like a knight in shining armor who had come to rescue her. But Hiro understood that her feelings were just a temporary infatuation. However, to Christina, it was a very serious matter. Her confession took all of her courage, which made Hiro happy. However, he bluntly told her that he couldn't accept her feelings. This shocked Christina, as she didn't really expect Hiro to reject her. To avoid hurting her further, Hiro went on to explain that her life as a noblewoman was completely different from his life, a mercenary. Although loving someone shouldn't be based on their circumstances, Hiro was just being realistic about the situation. He made Christina realize that they were not meant to be together. However, it seemed Christina was so serious about him that she was willing to give up her noble title. Now that things had gotten serious, Hiro explained that she couldn't do that. She is the sole heir of the Darenwald family, and if she really gave up her title, who would carry on the legacy of her parents and ancestors? Furthermore, if she did that, the Count would surely come after him. For this reason, Hiro made her realize that he was only doing this out of concern for his own life, and couldn't choose a path that might put his loved ones in danger. Because of this, Christina couldn't hold back her emotions any longer. She burst into tears, afraid that everything would change between her and Hiro. Fortunately, May came to the rescue and comforted her. However, as soon as May and Christina left, Hiro also couldn't contain the mixed emotions in his heart. It seemed he felt guilty for not being skilled enough to comfort a girl. In the end, Hiro rejected Christina and pushed everything onto May, which made him feel guilty towards May and hate himself. Even so, by this point, Hiro felt that facing pirates was easier than dealing with girls confessing their feelings. Speaking of girls, Mimi suddenly entered his room and jumped right onto the bed. Confused about what was happening, Hiro asked Mimi what she was doing. At first, Mimi seemed to be okay when she looked at him, until she suddenly burst into tears. As it turned out, Mimi had heard about what happened between Hiro and Christina, and she couldn't control her emotions. Upon learning that Hiro had chosen her and Elma over Christina, Mimi explained that she was so happy he chose them, so happy that she started to cry. She had been worried that Hiro would replace them with Christina, but after hearing the news, Mimi couldn't help but feel relieved, even though she felt very sorry for Christina. However, when Mimi thought about it, she knew that Hiro must be feeling even worse than they were right now, so she tried to hold back her emotions. Although Hiro wasn't good at comforting others, he did his best to make Mimi feel better. After all, he understood how Mimi felt to some extent, because she had been friends with Christina from the very beginning. So it was clear Mimi couldn't forgive herself for feeling happy, even though Christina was the one who got hurt. But thanks to her, Hiro felt the gloomy feelings he had before start to fade away. Moreover, it seemed nothing made Mimi feel more at peace than being with Hiro like this. After their short talk, the two of them finally went to meet the others. Elma seemed much calmer than Mimi. It wasn't that Elma seemed indifferent, but rather that she knew there was no way the Count would have allowed Hiro to have a relationship with Christina in the first place. On top of that, she also understood that Christina didn't have time for that. This statement left Hiro a bit confused as he didn't really understand what Elma meant. Then, Elma continued, explaining that since Christina was the sole heir, if something were to happen to the current head of the family, her grandfather, it would be troublesome if an unprepared heir had to take over. This meant that the Count was obligated to prioritize Christina's education, which also meant she wouldn't be free to pursue romance, or things like that. Hearing this, Hiro felt a little sorry for Christina, but since it was her duty as a noble of the Empire, there wasn't much they could do about it. After all, with great power comes great responsibility. Now that the issue with Christina was resolved, it seemed Hiro's next problem was May. However, Elma reassured him that everything would be fine as long as nothing unexpected happened. Besides, the Empire's mechanical intelligences were all focused on the completion of romantic relationships. Or rather, they craved a happy ending, regardless of their personality settings. As they were talking quietly amongst themselves, May suddenly cut in, saying that for her, love and romance would save the universe. Hiro now remembered that May was a love addict. Realizing that she might have accidentally given Christina some strange advice, Hiro immediately asked May to confirm. May quickly explained that she hadn't given any weird advice. In fact, she had told Christina to strive in her studies, developing both her mind and body to achieve her full potential as the heir to Count Darrenwald. If she could do that, no one could object. If Christina wanted to take Hiro for herself, she looked at Hiro with a slight glimmer of hope in her eyes. Christina felt motivated to do better so that she could be with Hiro in the future. This obviously surprised Hiro, as he had no plans of becoming a noble himself. The next day, the group got back to work. While they were working, Elma was quite surprised to see Hiro's serious expression. Turns out he was thinking about the reward he was expecting and wondering if it was time to buy a mothership. Since Hiro brought it up, Elma was curious about which model he wanted to get. Hiro had narrowed down his choices. The first ship on his list was the Nighthawk. This model was designed with speed as its key feature, and it had the best maneuverability in its class. However, its durability, armor, and overall defense, as well as its cargo capacity, were lacking compared to other motherships. However, for Elma, this ship's beautifully aerodynamic design was a perfect fit, since it could outrun anyone if they were being chased. The second ship on Hiro's list was the Isekai'd Bladnir. Compared to the Nighthawk, this ship focused on defense, so its durability was excellent, and its armor was very thick. It could hold a large amount of cargo, and its design allowed for a lot of customization. However, the heavy armor meant that its speed and overall handling would be significantly reduced. But for May, there was no doubt she could handle the mothership's speed or weaknesses. But would it be a good choice to bring out the Krishna's full potential? As they started debating which ship to choose, Elma insisted they should go with the Nighthawk, because for her, being able to run fast was crucial. Plus, its good evasion performance and the ability to make a quick retreat when needed were very appealing. However, May suggested choosing the Isekai'd Bladnir for her, because expanding their cargo capacity should be the main factor when buying a mothership. The reason was that they couldn't fully rely on the Nighthawk. Besides, the Krishna could take off in most situations when entering a battle, so May believed they could use that ship for most combat scenarios. That's why she believed the mothership should prioritize defense over evasion or offense. If Hiro thought about it, May had a point. But from the team's safety perspective, the ability to retreat was also important. More importantly, Elma would be the one piloting the ship. This meant Hiro felt she wouldn't be a good fit for a slow ship. Now that Hiro mentioned it, May actually thought she would be the one piloting the mothership in the future, based on her explanation. Elma and Mimi were essential members of the Krishna, so by process of elimination, she thought she would be the one taking on the pilot role from now on. In terms of safety, they could take a bit of a risk if it was just an android like her on board. Even in the worst-case scenario where the mothership gets shot down, if she was the only one on board, it would still be manageable. So, after careful consideration, Hiro finally chose the Isekai'd Bladnir. After the rather serious meeting about the mothership, the Count finally summoned them for a meeting. As soon as everyone was in position, the Count announced that he hadn't summoned them to pressure them in any way. All the Count wanted to tell them was his deep gratitude for what Hiro and his party had done for them the other day. The Count also went on to express his shame over the recent series of events. He was well aware that his son was an ambitious person, and as a Count, he felt he had acted like a senile old man for not realizing it. Without the help of Hiro and his party, the Count knew he could have lost Christina as well. That was why he was so incredibly grateful for the party's help. As the Count bowed his head, Hiro and the others couldn't believe their eyes because a real noble was actually bowing to them. In addition, the Count also brought some good news for the group. Since what they did was such a noble act, the Count decided to repay them. He wanted to make Hiro one of his knights. But unlike what Christina had said, the Count was aware that Hiro would definitely not accept this offer. Then, Hiro suggested that perhaps they could buy him a new mothership, as this would surely help him and his party a great deal. Hiro further explained that this ship would bring out the Krishna's full potential, and basically, it was the ship he really wanted to be able to earn more money. But because he said all of this directly to Christina, the Count felt a bit strange about Hiro. So he reminded him that he wouldn't ask him to be mindful of his circumstances, as he also had friends. with whom he could dispense with social formalities despite their different statuses. However, the Count was very serious when he told Hiro that he would not allow the kind of relationship Christina was hoping for. But since the Count knew Hiro already understood this, he decided not to bring it up again. As for the mothership, the Count told them he knew a shipbuilder in the nearby Brad star system. Since their party was also planning to head there, model, the Count gave Hiro the crest of the Darenwald family. This crest proves their support for Hiro, because the Darenwald family is involved in exporting mineral resources within the Brad star system. If Hiro carries this crest during negotiations, it will be very useful. Hiro was actually reconsidering whether or not he should accept this crest, as he felt it might bring him a lot of trouble. However, the Count quickly reassured Hiro, telling him not to worry about the thoughts swirling in his head, because this crest wouldn't restrict what he could do. As soon as he handed the crest to Hiro, the Count immediately excused himself, informing the group that he had to continue negotiations with the Imperial Army. However, he gestured for the group and Christina to have a meal and relax a bit before he left. On his way out, the Count suddenly noticed Mimi, who reminded him of someone he had known before. Mimi quickly said that he was probably mistaken, though with a hint of anxiety, but it was a rather strange remark for the Count to make. Elma and Hiro didn't think much of it and just went on with their business. A few days later, Christina seemed to be trying to convince Hiro to stay a little longer. However, since everything was settled, there was no more work for a mercenary like Hiro and his crew. So Hiro decided to leave. Christina respected his decision and only asked him to visit her if he had time. Witnessing Christina's transformation from a timid princess into a brave noble respected by all, Hiro couldn't refuse her request. And so their ship finally departed. Christina remained alone, even though Hiro and his group had left. Even so, Christina felt grateful to have met them. To her, Hiro was never the type of person to stay in one place for long. He was like a bird flying freely through space, and she, a powerless girl, couldn't be the cage to hold him back. However, she hoped that in a few years, when she was strong enough to stand as his equal, she would try to become a place where he could find safety. Resolute and full of hope thanks to Mei's words, Christina looked toward the journey she was about to embark on until the day she and Hiro would meet again. After several days of travel, Hiro and his crew finally arrived at the Brad star system. As soon as they arrived, Hiro informed the group that they should head straight for the main shipyard. However, upon checking, it seemed they were being scanned. This scanning wasn't illegal. They weren't military or police, so the best the group could do was ignore them. These scanners weren't hiding their identities either. Although Hiro didn't feel particularly bad about it, being scanned like this wasn't a pleasant feeling at all. Still, since there were no signs of attack, Hiro decided to ignore them. That was until he noticed that more and more ships were beginning to scan them, and these ships even started to surround them. Although these vessels weren't directly harming the group, Elma couldn't deny that they made her feel uneasy. Left with no other choice, Hiro decided to speed up to get away from these strange ships. However, when they requested to land, even more ships began to scan them. After a check, Mei's analysis showed that these ships all belonged to the Spaced Dwerger Company. This left Elma confused, as the shipbuilder should have known they were coming. Based on Mei's analysis, it might be because the Krishna is a rare ship and the Brad system is home to many curious people, so they'd definitely be interested in something new to them, like the Krishna. Still, there are just too many of them. The Brad system is very proactive in pursuing technology, and uses pirates as guinea pigs in what they call evaluation tests. It's gotten to the point where even the shipbuilders hunt pirates in this area. It's said that pirates usually stay away from the space around shipbuilders for this very reason. However, Hiro found this incredibly unpleasant. Even though it wasn't illegal, Hiro just felt it was a disrespectful act. But fortunately, it seemed they could still land safely. Just as they touched down, an android receptionist led them to a negotiation area inside. There, someone was in charge of building a ship for Hiro. When Hiro opened the door, he was quite surprised to see that the person he was meeting looked like a child. Or rather, a dwarf. In any case, they were on Spaced Dwerger, which is mainly inhabited by dwarves. But it seemed this was the first time Hiro was learning of this. After everyone was seated, the dwarf introduced herself as Sarah. The meeting began, and Sarah asked the group what kind of transport ship they were looking for. But before Hiro could even answer what the ship model he had in mind, Sarah interrupted and suggested they choose the SDMS-020 model. She began persuading Hiro that this ship model was the company's bestseller, and although it was an older design, it still had high performance. However, since it was such a good model, Hiro knew for sure it would be very expensive. But Sarah was willing to make some adjustments, and the discussion about the changes to be made on the ship began. Sarah eventually offered an exclusive contract with the company, and if Hiro signed, she was willing to offer a steep discount, bringing the ship's price down to $22 million. However, Hiro felt very suspicious because no one would just easily offer this kind of exclusive contract to anyone. Meanwhile, Sarah explained that Hiro had risen from bronze to gold rank in a short period, making him a noteworthy and promising mercenary, which was why he was receiving such a huge discount. However, instead of feeling reassured, Hiro felt even more suspicious. Why did the company know so many details about him? Why would they investigate him? What was their purpose? Before making a final decision, Hiro asked Sarah about the nature of this exclusive contract. To help Hiro understand better, Sarah simply explained that the contract would include the following terms. First, Hiro and his team would continue to use the company's mothership. They would also be allowed to use the company's ship maintenance services. Besides that, the company would regularly upload operational data to ensure the ship is always updated. And most importantly, Hiro's achievements would be used in the company's advertising campaigns. However, these 4 points were just some of the terms in the contract, as it could still be modified and developed to its fullest extent. Hiro didn't think much of it, nor did he have a problem with the first 2 terms. However, the latter terms were what made him feel a bit suspicious. To be more certain, he decided to ask for the team's opinion on the matter. According to Elma, as long as the company wasn't taking personal information, she didn't see a problem with the contract. But if their actions were restricted because of the company's advertising, Elma thought they should pass. May agreed because this could be a problem if Spaced Burgyar had to control everything they did. Once that was cleared up, Mimi wondered why the company would advertise mercenary work in the first place. Sarah explained that it was because of the operational data that mercenaries possessed. However, she assured them that only the machine's data would be transmitted, not their personal data. As for the advertising, the company would use the data they collected from mercenaries like Hiro, his team, and their catalogs as real-world data in exchange. Hiro and his team would get priority media coverage. However, Hiro still didn't understand what Sarah was talking about, so she continued to explain that the company was involved in many industries besides spaceship manufacturing, including entertainment media. One of their standout products was documentaries about mercenaries hunting down pirates, which was very popular with viewers. Since Hiro knew nothing about the entertainment media industry, he decided to ask for Mimi's opinion on the matter before making a decision. He was quite surprised to see Mimi more excited about this than he had expected. It turned out that back in the colony, Mimi had watched a lot of shows about mercenaries and hunters, which explained why she was so excited that the company was going to make a show about their team. Sarah also informed Hiro that the lives of the permanent residents in the colonies, those who travel through space, were very interesting, and so shows about the lives of mercenaries were very popular. By this point, the group had a better understanding of what the company wanted to do with their exclusive contract. Elma suggested that they should refuse the contract, but Mimi immediately objected because the company would know the team's entire lineup, and their relationships would be exposed to the whole universe, which Hiro was quite worried about. In this universe, men and women living together on a spaceship are often assumed to be in a romantic relationship, and this bothered Hiro. While Hiro was thinking, Mimi, who had no idea what was going on, asked him if it was really a problem, seeing as the whole universe already knew about their relationship. With an innocent smile, Mimi continued, saying they had nothing to hide, and that it was actually too late to worry since everyone they'd met already knew. To further persuade them, Sarah added that they would be featured separately when it aired. After giving it some thought, Hiro realized he didn't really mind. Although the company had priority media rights, they couldn't force them to accept the coverage. Besides, it seemed Elma was also fine with this, as long as the company didn't use their voices and likenesses without permission. May agreed as well, but on the condition that she would inspect the data before it was handed over to the company. In any case, according to May, since her duty was to protect her master, this was non-negotiable. So Sarah had no choice but to accept May and Elma's additional requests. However, before they finalized the contract, the group also requested more weapons for the ship, since they would need them when dealing with pirates. May also requested medium-sized laser cannons and small missile launchers to ensure their ship was fully equipped. EMLS, also known as electromagnetic launchers or railguns, unlike beam cannons, have a slow rate of fire and use physical projectiles, making it very difficult to hit moving targets. but when they do hit, their power far surpasses that of a laser. It was a special weapon that everyone admired, as it could be used effectively by the entire team. After everything was discussed, Sarah decided to end the meeting since she had to check back with her superiors. As soon as Sarah left, Hiro immediately asked Mei if she had really intended to do that from the very beginning, equipping the mothership with heavy weaponry. Mei quickly replied yes, as that had indeed been her intention from the start. Although it seemed like a good idea, Elma felt that Mei had overstepped her bounds a bit for a service machine. For Elma, no matter what Mei's goal was, provoking her master like that seemed a bit excessive. Mei explained that her reason for existence, her very body and soul, was to serve her master. That is, Hiro and only Hiro. Mei continued to explain that the current environment was ideal for her to serve Hiro, and that everyone else was just a servant. However, 98.8% of her innate abilities were being wasted. At this rate, it would take about 1,200 years for Hiro's investment to become worthwhile. That was why she was constantly pestering her master for money like this. Still, Hiro felt that things were progressing well, since this decision would expand their pirate hunting operations and significantly reduce the team's risk of death. Just a few seconds later, Sarah returned to inform the group that her superiors had agreed to their conditions, and that the ship would take 2 weeks to be delivered. Before Hiro and the team left, Sarah had one more thing to say. Since the group had accepted the ship's modifications with her company, she proposed that they also allow the company to upgrade their warship while they were at it. Since the group was buying a mothership, Sarah figured they should let the company handle its maintenance. Hiro thought this was a good time to do so, and immediately asked Sarah how much they would offer, which startled her a bit, just as he had predicted. It seemed Hiro already knew what the company was up to. After all the scans they had been through before, he was well aware that the company already knew a lot about them. The Krishna was no ordinary ship. It would be a gold mine for their engineers. This also meant they wanted to examine the Krishna's interior and technology. After Hiro saw through her intentions, Sarah tried to remain calm and stated that the upgrade would be completely free of charge. However, since Hiro understood what was happening, he immediately rejected the offer, saying they couldn't reach an agreement. As Hiro was about to leave, Sarah tried to stop him, seemingly begging him to agree. She even went as far as to say they would provide weapons worth 3 million and plenty of ammunition for free. However, Mei thought that it would be much more reasonable if the total value was 20 million NL. This, however, would be a discount of 11 million from the original price, which was a total reduction of 30%, something considered to be daylight robbery. As Hiro thought about this, he realized Sarah had a point about a few things. However, Mei stood her ground, and when she started threatening Sarah that she would release the Krishna's operational data, Sarah immediately agreed to Mei's terms. This came as a bit of a surprise to Hiro, as he hadn't expected Mei to have that kind of data on hand. So, to make sure she wouldn't do this in the future, Hiro told Mei that she would be punished for this later. Surprisingly, Mei seemed a bit flustered but also very pleased with what Hiro said, making Hiro wonder why. It seems one of the robots had a different understanding of punishment, one that brought her indescribable pleasure. After their meeting with Sarah, the group continued to tour the city. During that time, Mimi suddenly wondered where they would live once Krishna was upgraded. Since Krishna was scheduled to be delivered the next day, Elma suggested they stay at a hotel for the time being, as there was still plenty of time. Hiro thought they could just head back and find a place to stay while they packed their things. However, when they returned to where Krishna was docked, they were surprised to see everyone around acting chaotically. It seemed the engineers in town had rushed over after hearing rumors about Krishna. They were even wrestling with officials who were trying to stop them from performing unauthorized scans, which was illegal. Because of that, they couldn't get inside. Elma had no choice but to announce to the crowd that Krishna would be transferred to Egger the next day, which left everyone stunned. She even told them they had decided to have the ship overhauled, so instead of wasting time dealing with the officials, Elma suggested they should use that time to figure out how to sneak onto the overhaul team. Without wasting a moment, everyone immediately rushed out and quickly made their way to Space at Wergyr. The next day, Hiro and his team checked in at a luxurious hotel. Upon arrival, they were stunned to see how incredibly extravagant the place was, so much so that Mimi began to feel uncomfortable just standing there, feeling completely out of place. Hiro started to feel the pressure too. Although he hadn't worried much about money back when he was a mercenary in the game, this level of luxury was truly stressful for someone from the lower middle class like him. Just as they were starting to think about finding another hotel, Elma informed everyone that the Sierra cost 10,000 NL per night, while this hotel was only 10,000 denel per week. This meant staying here was much cheaper than on the Sierra. Besides, Elma also thought it would be much better for a gold-rank mercenary like Hiro to stay in a hotel like this, because if he stayed in a cheap one, people might look down on him. Hearing what Elma said, Hiro was rather surprised but also suspicious about how she was so familiar with these things. Now that Hiro had mentioned it, Elma started to get nervous, and before she knew it, she began to explain, saying it was because she was an elf. And as an elf, she had experienced more in life than anyone else in the room, which was why she knew about such things. Before Hiro could ask anything else, Elma quickly told the group they should go see their room. When they entered the room, they were shocked by how spacious it was. The suite started with a living room and a dining room, and also had 4 bedrooms, a large walk-in closet, a dressing room, a bathroom, and 2 toilets. After the hotel staff gave them a tour of the room, Hiro immediately started unpacking his luggage. As he was getting ready to organize his things, May began to plead, hoping Hiro would reconsider her punishment. However, it seemed Hiro's mind was made up, as he wanted May to reflect on her actions, especially since she had gone too far this time. Although May had been expecting a different kind of punishment, Hiro ended up ordering her to do nothing at all. Specifically that she was not to serve him in any capacity other than as a bodyguard, since serving her master was a crucial part of May's existence. Being forbidden from doing so was an unbearable pain. Hiro said this method came from Atelier. The android at the reception desk had told him about it. According to her, those like May, young, loyal, and mechanically brilliant, often tended to act recklessly for their masters, and so Hiro was shown punishment methods to help May reflect. And indeed, the method was already showing immediate effects, as May now looked very distressed, hoping Hiro would allow her to do her job, because she was starting to feel a great loss of energy. Elma and Mimi tried to persuade Hiro to let May help him, since she seemed to have had a change of heart about her actions. Because of this, Hiro finally forgave May and allowed her to assist him in the negotiations. This time, however, he made May promise not to hide anything, even if it meant making a sacrifice. Mai immediately responded with an enthusiastic yes, and began to unpack Hiro's luggage. She even offered to make him tea, as they started to settle in at the hotel. Suddenly, May's phone rang. After answering, she informed everyone that it was a call from the Krishna repair workshop. They wanted Hiro to visit their shop. However, it seemed Hiro was too lazy to go there right now, so he asked May to tell the workshop that they should come to the hotel since he was their client. But it appeared May had already told them that, but they still insisted that Hiro come see them in person. Hearing this, Hiro felt a bit annoyed since he was finally about to get some rest and relaxation. On top of that, he was planning to hang out with Mimi and Elma, but because of this call from the repair shop, it looked like he'd have to reschedule for another day. May tried to suggest that they could file a complaint with Sarah from Spaced Dwerger, but Hiro told her not to, as he would go there himself. Hiro also wanted to take a walk by himself for once, so he asked May to stay at the hotel and look after Mimi and Elma. After walking for a few minutes, Hiro finally arrived at the repair workshop. He was surprised when he saw the interior of the Krishna. On top of that, it seemed the workshop was staffed entirely by dwarves. As soon as the dwarves recognized him, one of the supervisors ordered his workers to restrain Hiro as they charged at him. Hiro was extremely confused and didn't know what to do, but he felt like he should run. However, before he could make a run for it, 2 female dwarves tackled him to the ground. When he came to, Hiro immediately asked everyone if this was the company's idea of common courtesy, or just how dwarves treated their customers. Sarah, looking apologetic and remorseful, immediately replied that it wasn't. Hiro then asked why they called him here and restrained him, saying he had overlooked a lot of rudeness since his arrival, but even someone as patient as him couldn't stay silent in the face of such disrespectful behavior. Sarah started crying and tried to explain everything. Since Hiro can't stand seeing girls cry, he immediately told Sarah to wipe her tears and stop. Even though she was a grown woman, Hiro felt this whole scene was just wrong, and he felt really sorry for Sarah. He said that he would let the repairs on the Krishna continue, but the purchase of the Skid Bladnir was on hold. This time, his decision to buy it would depend on how he was treated, because she had already taken things too far. Sarah had no choice but to accept Hiro's conditions. Besides, while this was a large workshop, maintaining a mothership still incurred significant management and maintenance costs. So, Hiro was sure that these dwarves would do their utmost to please them. However, before leaving, Hiro decided not to punish the 2 dwarves who had tackled him himself. but to leave it to Sarah. It was partly because he didn't want the hassle, but how she handled the situation would also affect his assessment of Sarah. Before heading back to the hotel, Hiro hoped that this time, Sarah and her team would show him some gratitude and sincerity. When Hiro returned to the hotel, and the girls, especially Mei, found out what happened, they couldn't contain their emotions hearing what their master had been through. But now that Hiro brought it up, Mimi began to wonder what the problem was, and why the workshop had summoned him. Based on what Hiro said about the dwarves wanting to restrain him, Elma and the others started to think about the possible reasons why they would want Hiro, especially Elma. Elma suggested that maybe they wanted to see Hiro's piloting skills. However, Mei was certain that Hiro's piloting data was protected, but that wasn't what Elma was implying. The dwarves had the ability to read metal, which meant they could have recognized the state of the Krishna's thrusters, with its propulsion and other parts operating without a safety system. And they probably recognized the wear and tear on the metal. This allowed them to understand exactly how the pilot controlled the ship. That was probably why they wanted to test the pilot. For Hiro, it all depended on the dwarves' attitude. Model, but he doubted they would do anything too bad. Elma, however, completely disagreed because they were talking about dwarves. Dwarves are famous for following their impulses. They're guided by instinct instead of theory, and impulse instead of reason. This means they might just do something crazy again. As Hiro started to feel worried once more, the doorbell to their hotel room suddenly rang, startling everyone. Who could be visiting them at this hour? When they opened the door, Hiro was quite bewildered by what he saw. It turned out to be the two dwarven girls from before, Tina and Whiska. It seemed this was what Sarah had ordered them to do, to take care of Hiro for the night as their earlier punishment. Now the question is, will Hiro let them have their fun with him and add them to his collection of girls, or will he set them free and give them a more suitable punishment? Let's find out.